When a broken man stumbled onto Elvis Presley's stage in Las Vegas, drunk and angry, 20,000 people thought security would throw him out in seconds. Instead, what happened next changed everything. The man pointed a shaking finger at the king of rock and roll and shouted words that made the entire theater go silent. "You ain't nothing but a fake. My brother could sing better than you, and he's dead because of people like you." Security rushed forward. The crowd booed. But then Elvis did something nobody expected. He raised his hand and stopped everyone. What Elvis did in the next 20 minutes would shock the world and reveal a truth he'd never told anyone before. But to understand why this moment mattered so much, we need to go back 6 months earlier, to a small yellow house in Tennessee, where two brothers shared a dream that would end in tragedy. The spotlight felt like liquid gold pouring over Elvis Presley's face. August heat pressed against the massive windows of the Las Vegas Hilton International Theater, but inside, 20,000 people forgot about the desert outside. They swayed, clapped, and sang along as Elvis moved across the stage, his white jumpsuit catching the lights like 1,000 tiny stars. "We're caught in a trap," Elvis sang, his voice rich and powerful, filling every corner of the enormous room. The band played behind him, drums thundering, guitars wailing, horns punctuating each phrase. "I can't walk out." Then everything stopped. A man stumbled onto the stage apron, his boots scraping against the polished wood. He wasn't supposed to be there. Security guards in dark suits jumped from their positions along the walls, but they were too far away. The man wore dirty jeans and a wrinkled work shirt. His face was red, twisted with something that looked like rage and pain mixed together. Elvis's hand froze in mid-gesture. The band hit one more note, then silence crashed over the theater like a wave. 20,000 people held their breath at exactly the same time. The man pointed a shaking finger at Elvis. His other hand gripped the edge of the stage to keep from falling. "You," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You ain't nothing but a fake." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman somewhere in the balcony screamed. The man swayed, and everyone could see he'd been drinking. A lot. His eyes were bloodshot, his words slurred at the edges. "My brother could sing better than you," the man yelled louder, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. Spit flew from his mouth. "And he's dead, dead, because of people like you." Two security guards reached the steps on either side of the stage. Their hands went to their belts, ready to grab this drunk fool and throw him out into the hot Vegas night. The audience started booing, angry that someone would ruin their show. Some people stood up, shouting at the man to get off the stage. But Elvis raised his hand. Just that. One simple gesture, palm out, fingers spread. The security guards stopped mid-step like they'd hit an invisible wall. The booing faded. Even the drunk man seemed to pause, surprised. Elvis stood perfectly still under the spotlight. Sweat ran down his face, but he didn't wipe it away. His dark eyes locked onto the man who'd called him a fake, who'd blamed him for a brother's death. For 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours, nobody in that entire massive theater moved or spoke. The man's finger was still pointing, but his arm trembled now. Up close, people in the front rows could see tears mixing with the sweat on his face. This wasn't just some drunk looking for attention. This was something else. Something raw and broken and real. Elvis's microphone hung loose in his other hand. The band members looked at each other, confused. The backup singers, 3 women in shimmering dresses, stood frozen like beautiful statues. Even the spotlight operator forgot to move, leaving both Elvis and the stranger trapped in the same circle of white gold light. The man's legs wobbled. "You don't even care," he said, quieter now, but the microphone still caught it. You just sing your songs and take your money, and boys like my Marcus, they die trying to be like you." Marcus. The name hung in the air. The man's voice broke on that word, shattered into pieces that made the watching crowd shift uncomfortably in their velvet seats. Red West, Elvis's bodyguard and childhood friend, moved toward the stage from the wings. His face was hard, professional. He'd handled 1,000 situations like this. Drunk fans, crazy people, folks who wanted to cause trouble. He knew exactly what to do. But before Red could take another step, Elvis did something nobody expected. He walked toward the man, not away. The crowd made a sound like a gasp and a whisper combined. What was Elvis thinking? The man could be dangerous. He could have a weapon. Elvis kept walking until he stood at the very edge of the stage, just 3 feet from where the drunk stranger swayed and wept and pointed. The king of rock and roll and a broken man in dirty work boots, face to face under lights that made everything look like a dream. 20,000 people leaned forward in their seats. And what Elvis did next would change everyone in that room forever. But first, they needed to understand how these two men, a superstar and a grieving stranger, had arrived at this impossible moment on a hot August night in Las Vegas. 6 months earlier, February 1974, the world looked completely different for Garrett Walsh. He stood in the doorway of a small garage behind a yellow house in Knoxville, Tennessee, watching his younger brother Andy tune an old acoustic guitar. The strings made soft pinging sounds as Andy adjusted each one, his ear close to the wood, listening for perfection. "You're gonna wear those strings out before you even play a note," Garrett said, smiling. Andy looked up and grinned. At 28 years old, he had their mother's gentle eyes and their father's strong jaw. "Can't sing if it ain't in tune, Garrett. You know that." "I know you're picky as an old cat," Garrett teased, stepping into the garage. It smelled like motor oil and sawdust, good smells that reminded him of their dad. Tools hung on pegboards along the walls, organized by size. Their father had done that before the mining accident took him 5 years ago. Andy strummed a chord and the sound filled the small space like sunshine breaking through clouds. He started singing "Can't Help Falling in Love," and Garrett felt that familiar tightness in his chest. Pride mixed with something that felt like sadness, though he couldn't explain why. His little brother had a gift. Everyone said so. At church on Sundays, people would close their eyes when Andy sang hymns, like they were hearing angels. At family gatherings, relatives would beg him to perform. Even strangers at the diner where Andy worked part-time would leave bigger tips when he hummed while pouring coffee. "You sound just like him," Garrett said when the song ended. "Like who?" Andy asked, but he was smiling because he already knew. "Elvis, you sound just like Elvis Presley." Andy laughed and set the guitar down gently. "Nobody sounds like Elvis. That man's one of a kind. So are you, little brother." They'd had this conversation 100 times. Garrett would praise Andy's talent. Andy would brush it off. But lately, something had changed. Andy had started talking about Nashville more, about making a real try at music instead of just dreaming about it. "I've been saving money," Andy said quietly, not meeting Garrett's eyes. "From the diner, from the weekend construction work. I've got almost $800 now." Garrett's smile faded a little. $800, he knew what that meant. Nashville? Just to see. Just to try. Andy looked up, his eyes bright with hope and fear mixed together. "I'm 28, Garrett. If I don't do it now, I never will. I don't want to wake up at 50 and wonder what could have been." Garrett wanted to say no, wanted to tell Andy that Nashville was full of dreamers who came home broke and broken, wanted to remind him that their mother Diane needed help with bills, that the yellow house aimed repairs, that the world wasn't kind to poor boys from Tennessee who sang pretty songs. But he didn't say any of those things. Instead, he walked over and put his hand on Andy's shoulder. "You've got something special," Garrett said, the words coming from somewhere deep and true. "Always have. Don't let anything stop you." Andy's face lit up like Christmas morning. He hugged Garrett hard, and Garrett hugged him back, breathing in the smell of his brother's cheap aftershave and the lavender soap their mama made them all use. "I won't let you down," Andy whispered. "You couldn't if you tried," Garrett said. That Sunday, Garrett sat in the back pew of Cornerstone Baptist Church like he always did. He wasn't much for religion since their daddy died, but he came for Mama and for Marcus. The congregation numbered maybe 60 people on a good day, mostly older folks and young families. Pastor Williams, a kind man with white hair and glasses, announced that Andy Walsh would be singing a special hymn. Andy walked to the front in his only good suit, the blue one they'd bought at Goodwill for their father's funeral. He looked nervous, his hands clasped in front of him, but when he opened his mouth to sing "How Great Thou Art," the nervousness disappeared. His voice rose clear and strong, filled with something that made people sit up straighter. An old woman in the second row started crying quietly. A little girl stopped swinging her feet. Even Pastor Williams closed his eyes, his lips moving in silent prayer. Garrett felt his throat tighten. He'd heard Andy sing this song dozens of times, but today it felt different. Today it felt like goodbye. After the service, people crowded around Marcus, shaking his hand, telling him he should be on the radio, asking when they'd see him on television. Andy stayed humble, thanking everyone, but Garrett could see the hunger in his eyes, the need to be more, to reach more people, to make the music matter beyond these church walls. Their mother Diane pulled Garrett aside in the parking lot. She was 49 but looked older, her nurse's uniform visible under her Sunday dress because she had to work a double shift later. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "He's really gonna do it, isn't he?" she asked quietly. "Go to Nashville?" "Yeah, Mama. I think so." She sighed, watching Andy talk excitedly with some teenagers who wanted his autograph on their church bulletins. "I'm scared for him, Garrett. That city eats boys like him alive. I know, but I'm also proud." She smiled, tears making her eyes shine. "Your daddy would be proud too." Andy got his voice, but he got your daddy's courage. Garrett didn't feel very courageous. He felt afraid, but he nodded anyway. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Andy practiced every spare moment. Garrett helped him record a demo tape using borrowed equipment from the high school music teacher. They stayed up until 3 in the morning, getting the levels right, choosing the best songs, arguing about whether to include the Elvis covers or stick to original material. "Do both," Garrett finally decided. "Show them you can honor the classics and create something new." They picked 4 songs for the tape. 2 were covers, "Love Me Tender" and "In the Ghetto." 2 were songs Andy had written himself, simple country ballads about small-town life and big sky dreams. When they finished, Andy played the tape back one more time. His voice filled Garrett's truck cab, and even through the cheap speakers, the talent was undeniable. "It's good," Andy said, but he sounded uncertain. "It's better than good," Garrett told him. "It's real. That's what matters." On March 15, 1974, Garrett loaded Andy's single suitcase and guitar case into his pickup truck. Their mother packed sandwiches and cookies in a paper bag, her hand shaking slightly. Andy wore his blue suit and carried the demo tape in his shirt pocket, right over his heart. The drive to Nashville took 4 hours. They didn't talk much. The radio played quietly. Johnny Cash, Dolly Parton, and yes, Elvis Presley, singing "Suspicious Minds." When Elvis's voice filled the truck, Andy turned it up and sang along, his voice blending perfectly with the King's. "That's gonna be you someday," Garrett said. Playing on the radio while some other dreamer drives to Nashville, Andy joked. No, making music that matters. Music that helps people feel less alone. Andy looked out the window at the Tennessee hills rolling past. That's all I want, really. Not to be famous, just to matter. Nashville rose up before them like a promise. Tall buildings, busy streets, signs for recording studios and music venues everywhere. Garrett's hands tightened on the steering wheel. This city had made legends, but it had also broken thousands of hopeful hearts. He pulled up to a cheap motel on the edge of town, $29 a night, which would eat through Andy's savings fast. They carried the suitcase and guitar up to the second floor room. The room was small and smelled like cigarettes and cleaning chemicals. One bed with a faded yellow bedspread, a TV bolted to the dresser, a bathroom with rust stains in the sink. But Andy looked at it like it was a palace. This is it, he said softly. This is where it starts. Garrett wanted to grab his brother, throw him back in the truck and drive home. Wanted to protect him from whatever was coming. But he just set down the suitcase and said, "You've got the audition Tuesday at 10, record label called Summit Sound, right?" "Right." Andy's hands were shaking as he hung his suit in the tiny closet. "What if I'm not good enough, Garrett?" "You're good enough," Garrett said firmly. "You just gotta stay true to who you are. Don't let them change you into something you're not." They ate the sandwiches their mama had packed, sitting on the bed, watching some game show on TV. When it got late, Garrett knew he had to leave. He had work in the morning back in Knoxville, a construction job that paid his bills and helped support Mama. At the door, the brothers hugged one more time. "I love you, little brother," Garrett said. "Love you too. Thanks for believing in me. Always." Garrett drove away as the sun set, watching in his rearview mirror until the motel disappeared from view. He had a bad feeling in his gut, but he told himself it was just worry, just normal big brother protection instinct. He had no way of knowing that in 3 months, Andy would be dead, and Garrett's whole world would shatter into pieces he'd never be able to put back together. Andy called Garrett the night before his audition. His voice crackled through the phone line, high and nervous. "I can't sleep," Andy admitted. "I keep practicing the songs over and over in my head. What if my voice cracks? What if I forget the word?" Garrett sat on his couch in his small apartment, still in his work clothes, concrete dust on his boots. He'd been a construction foreman for 6 years now. Ever since dropping out of college when their father died, someone had to pay the bill. "Your voice never cracks," Garrett said. "And you've sung those songs 1,000 times. You know them in your bones. There's gonna be important people there. Producers. Maybe even artists. They're just people, Marcus. Same as you and me. They eat breakfast and tie their shoes one at a time just like everybody else." Andy laughed, but it sounded shaky. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise, you just never listened before." They talked for another hour about nothing important. Sports, what Mama was cooking for Sunday dinner, whether Garrett's truck would make it another year. Normal brother talk that felt precious because they both knew Andy was changing, moving into a world Garrett couldn't follow. "Knock 'em dead tomorrow," Garrett said before hanging up. "I will. I promise." The audition took place at Summit Sound Recording, a mid-sized label that had launched a few country stars over the past decade. Andy arrived 30 minutes early, his blue suit freshly pressed, his demo tape clutched in sweating hands. The waiting room held 12 other singers. Some looked polished and professional with expensive guitars and designer clothes. Others looked like Marcus, small-town hopefuls with big dreams and empty pockets. A girl with blonde hair kept doing vocal exercises, her scales filling the room. A man in a cowboy hat looked over sheet music, his lips moving silently. "Andy Walsh?" A woman with a clipboard appeared in the doorway. Andy stood so fast he almost dropped his guitar. He followed her down a hallway covered with gold records and photographs of famous musicians. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. The audition room was smaller than he expected. 3 people sat behind a long table, 2 men in their 50s wearing casual clothes, and a younger woman with red hair and sharp eyes. A microphone stood in the center of the room, and someone had set up recording equipment in the corner. "Whenever you're ready," the older man on the left said. His nameplate read, Roy Kittering, A&R Direct. Andy positioned himself at the microphone. His hands shook as he settled the guitar strap over his shoulder. This was it. Everything he'd worked for, dreamed about, practiced until his fingers bled. He sang 3 songs. First, an original ballad he'd written about his father called Mountain Man. Then he performed his version of a popular country song. Finally, at their request, he sang an Elvis number, his own arrangement that honored the original but added country flavor. When he finished, the room stayed silent for what felt like forever. The woman with red hair leaned forward. "You've got real talent. Your voice has something special, emotion, control, range." The original song was particularly strong. Andy felt hope bloom in his chest like spring flowers. But, Roy Kittering said, and that one word made the flowers wilt, "You need to figure out what you are. Are you Elvis? Are you country? Are you a songwriter? The market doesn't reward confusion." I can be whatever you need," Andy said quickly. "I can adapt." The third judge, who hadn't spoken yet, shook his head. "That's the problem. We don't need adaptation. We need authenticity. You need to find your sound, not copy someone else's." "But you just said I sounded too original in the country song." "No," the woman interrupted. "I said you need to pick a lane. Either go full Elvis tribute. There's a market for that. Or go completely original and find what makes Andy Walsh different from every other singer in Nashville." They talked for another 10 minutes, giving Andy contradictory advice that made his head spin. Be more like Elvis. Be less like Elvis. Sound more country. Sound more rock. Be authentic. Give the market what it wants. Finally, Roy stood up and shook Andy's hand. "Leave your demo. We'll be in touch if we want to move forward. Don't call us, we'll call you." Andy left the building in a daze. The sunshine felt too bright, the traffic too loud. He'd expected either yes or no, not this confusing middle ground of maybe if you completely change who you are. He walked for hours through downtown Nashville, his guitar case bumping against his leg. Music poured from every bar and venue, live bands, jukeboxes, street performers. Everyone in this city could sing. What made him think he was special? That evening, sitting alone in his motel room eating vending machine crackers for dinner, Andy made a decision. He'd stay in Nashville. He'd network, practice, figure out his sound. He'd make this work no matter what it took. He called Garrett, trying to sound upbeat. Audition went okay. They said I have talent but need to develop my style more. I'm gonna stick around for a while, really give this a shot. Garrett heard something in his brother's voice, a forced cheerfulness that didn't ring true. "You sure you're all right?" Yeah, just tired. It's a lot, you know. This city is intense. You can always come home, Marcus. Nothing wrong with regrouping. "I'm not quitting," Andy said, and there was an edge to his voice Garrett had never heard before. "I'm not gonna be like Dad, dying in a hole in the ground with nothing to show for my life. Dad was a good man who took care of his family." "I know. I didn't mean," Andy sighed heavily. "I'm sorry. I'm just stressed. I'll call you later this week, okay?" After hanging up, Garrett sat staring at the phone, That bad feeling in his gut growing stronger. The next 3 weeks were hard for Marcus. His savings dwindled fast. Motel rent, cheap food, gas money to get to open mic nights and networking events. Summit Sound hadn't called, neither had the 2 other labels where he'd dropped off demo tapes. He got a job washing dishes at a barbecue restaurant downtown. The work was hot, greasy, and humiliating for someone who'd imagined himself on stage. His hands got burned from the industrial dishwasher. His back ached from standing 10-hour shifts. But the restaurant was where he met Vincent Caruso. Vincent was a regular customer, always dressed sharp in suits that looked expensive, always surrounded by younger people who hung on his every word. He had slicked back dark hair, a gold watch, and the kind of smile that made promises without using words. One night, Vincent overheard Andy humming while scraping plates into the trash. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, that smile gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "You got a good voice, kid. You a singer?" Andy looked up, startled. "Trying to be." "Vincent Caruso." He extended a manicured hand. "Artist management and development." "What's your name?" "Andy Walsh, sir." Vincent's smile grew wider. "Let's talk business, Andy Walsh. Take your break. Come sit with me." Every instinct should have told Andy to say no, but he was tired, broke, and desperate. So he washed his hands, untied his apron, and followed Vincent to a corner booth. "I scout talent," Vincent explained, ordering them both coffee. "I've launched careers for some of the biggest names in Nashville. I can spot raw potential a mile away, and son, you've got it." "I'd been trying to get signed. Record labels." Vincent waved dismissively. "They don't know talent anymore. Too corporate. What you need is someone who believes in you, who'll invest in your development, get you connected to the right people." "I don't have money for a manager." "Who said anything about money up front?" Vincent leaned forward, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "I invest in artists I believe in. I cover your expenses, get you studio time, introduce you to producers. When you make it big, and you will, we split the profits. Simple partnership." It sounded too good to be true. Andy knew that. But Vincent had credentials, business cards from recording studios, photos with famous musicians, stories about artists he'd helped discover. "Thing is," Vincent continued, "Nashville runs on energy. You gotta be on all the time. Sharp. Ready. Can't be falling asleep at networking events or showing up to auditions tired from washing dishes." "I don't have a choice about the job." I know. Tough situation." Vincent reached into his jacket and pulled out a small pill bottle. "This is what the professionals use. Keeps you alert, focused, energetic. All legal, prescribed by a real doctor. Half the recording artists in this town take them." Andy stared at the bottle. "I don't do drugs." "These aren't drugs, kid. They're medicine. Energy supplements. You think Elvis Presley performed 300 shows a year without a little help?" Vincent set the bottle on the table between them. "Just try them. One before auditions or performances. You'll see the difference. If you don't like them, no harm done." Andy should have walked away, should have called Garrett, should have remembered every warning his mother gave him about strangers with easy solutions. But he was so tired, so broke, so afraid of failing and going home with nothing. Just to try." Andy said quietly. Vincent's smile could have lit up the whole restaurant. "That's my boy. Trust me, Marcus. 6 months from now you'll be thanking me when you're signing your first record deal." Andy took the bottle. He didn't open it that night. Didn't take any pills. He told himself he'd just hold on to them, maybe use one if he had a really important audition. But Vincent kept appearing at the restaurant, kept encouraging him, kept talking about all the doors that would open if Andy just showed a little more energy, a little more spark. 2 weeks later, Andy had an audition with a smaller label. He was exhausted from a double shift, his voice felt rough, and he couldn't afford to mess this up. He took one pill. Then another audition came, and he took 2 pills. The energy was incredible. He felt sharp, confident, unstoppable. His performances got better, or at least they felt better. The pills made everything brighter, faster, more exciting. He started taking them before his dishwashing shifts to make the time go faster. Then before going out to network, then just to get through regular days. When Garrett called, Andy told him everything was fine. Great, actually, things were really starting to happen. He didn't mention Vincent, didn't mention the pills, didn't mention that his hands had started shaking when he didn't take them, or that he'd lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks, or that he couldn't sleep anymore without taking something else Vincent had given him. He especially didn't mention that the pills had started costing money, a lot of money, and that Vincent was keeping a tab that Andy couldn't possibly repay. "I'm gonna make you a star," Vincent kept promising. "Just trust the process." And Marcus, desperate and scared and too proud to admit he'd made terrible mistakes, kept trusting, until the night in May when everything fell apart in the worst possible way. May 23rd, 1974, started like any other Thursday for Garrett Walsh. He woke at 5:30 in the morning, made instant coffee in his small kitchen, and drove his pickup truck to the construction site on the east side of Knoxville. His crew was building a new elementary school, good honest work that paid decent money. By noon, they'd poured foundation for the north wing. Garrett was checking measurements with his foreman clipboard when he heard someone calling his name. He looked up to see Bobby Chen, one of his younger workers, jogging toward him with a strange expression. "Boss, there's a phone call for you in the site office. They said it's urgent. Something about your family." Garrett's stomach dropped. Urgent family calls never meant good news. He sprinted across the construction site, concrete dust rising around his boots, and grabbed the phone receiver the secretary held out to him. "This is Garrett Walsh." "Mr. Walsh, this is Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville. We have your brother Andy here. He's been admitted to intensive care." The world tilted sideways. Garrett gripped the edge of the desk to stay upright. What happened? Is he okay? He collapsed during a performance at a venue downtown. The paramedics brought him in about an hour ago. "Sir, I need to be direct with you. His condition is critical. You should come as soon as possible." "What does that mean, critical? What's wrong with him?" The nurse's voice softened with practiced sympathy. "The doctors are working on him now. They'll explain everything when you arrive. How soon can you get here?" 4 hours. Maybe 3 if I speed." "Please, is he awake? Can I talk to him?" "I'm sorry, Mr. Walsh, he's unconscious. But please drive safely. We'll take good care of him until you arrive." Garrett didn't remember hanging up the phone. Didn't remember telling his foreman he had to leave. He just found himself behind the wheel of his truck, pushing 80 miles per hour down the highway toward Nashville, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. He tried calling his mother from a gas station payphone, but she was at work and the hospital where she nursed wouldn't patch him through during her shift. He left a message with the front desk. "Tell Diane Walsh her son Andy is in the hospital in Nashville. Critical condition." "I'm going there now." The drive felt endless. Every mile stretched like taffy. Garrett's mind raced through terrible possibilities. Car accident? Heart attack? Had Andy been hurt in a fight? Not once did Garrett think about drugs. His little brother didn't do drugs. Andy barely drank beer. He was the good one, the pure one, the one with actual dreams worth chasing. Vanderbilt Medical Center rose up like a giant white monument. Garrett abandoned his truck in the emergency parking lot and ran inside. The fluorescent lights were too bright. The antiseptic smell burned his nose. The TV in the waiting room played some soap opera that nobody watched. "Andy Walsh," Garrett gasped at the information desk. "My brother. ICU." The elderly volunteer checked her charts. "Fourth floor, intensive care unit. Elevators are down that hallway to your right." Garrett ran. His work boots squeaked on the polished floors. People in hospital gowns and nurses in white uniforms stepped aside as he barreled past them. The elevator took forever. When the doors finally opened on the fourth floor, a nurse intercepted him before he could go further. "Family of Andy Walsh? I'm his brother. Garrett. Where is he? Come with me, please. Dr. Patterson needs to speak with you first." She led him to a small consultation room with plastic chairs and outdated magazines. Garrett couldn't sit down. He paced, his heart hammering, until a doctor in green scrubs entered. The man looked tired, his eyes shadowed. "Mr. Walsh, I'm Dr. Patterson. I'm treating your brother. What happened to him?" Dr. Patterson gestured to the chairs. "Please sit." "I don't want to sit. I want to see Marcus." The doctor's face remained calm but firm. "You will, but first you need to understand his condition." Andy was brought in suffering from a severe drug overdose. Amphetamines, primarily mixed with several other substances we're still identifying. Garrett stared at him. The words made no sense, like the doctor was speaking a foreign language. "That's impossible. Andy doesn't do drugs." "I understand this is shocking." "No, you don't understand. My brother is a singer. He takes care of himself. He doesn't even smoke cigarettes." "There's been a mistake." Dr. Patterson pulled out a chart. Andy told the paramedics his name before he lost consciousness. His identification confirms it. "And I'm very sorry, but the toxicology is clear. He's ingested massive amounts of amphetamines over an extended period. His system is in shock." The room spun. Garrett finally collapsed into a chair. "How bad?" "He's in a coma." His heart stopped twice in the ambulance, but the paramedics revived him. "Right now we have him stabilized, but the next 48 hours are critical. The drugs caused severe stress to his cardiovascular system and neurological damage we're still assessing." "Can I see him?" Dr. Patterson nodded. "Yes. But prepare yourself. He's on a ventilator and connected to several monitors. He won't look like the brother you remember." Nothing could have prepared Garrett for what he saw when the nurse led him to Andy's room. His little brother lay in a narrow hospital bed, tubes running from his mouth and arms. Machines beeped and hissed around him. His face looked grey, sunken, like someone had drained all the life out of him. Purple circles shadowed his closed eyes. His arms, always strong from carrying his guitar, looked thin as kindling. Garrett's knees buckled. He grabbed the doorframe, forcing himself to stay upright. "You can talk to him," the nurse said gently. "Some studies suggest coma patients can hear familiar voices." Garrett moved to the bedside on legs that felt like water. He took Andy's cold hand carefully, avoiding the IV line. The hand that used to strum guitar strings so beautifully now lay limp and lifeless. "Hey, little brother," Garrett whispered, his voice breaking. "It's me. I'm here now. You're gonna be okay. You hear me? You're gonna be fine." The machines beeped their mechanical rhythm. Andy didn't move, didn't respond, didn't even flutter an eyelid. Garrett pulled a chair close and sat down, still holding his brother's hand. "I don't know what happened to you in this city. I don't know who did this or why. But we're gonna fix it. Soon as you wake up, we're going home. Forget Nashville. Forget the music industry. We'll figure something else out." Hours passed. Nurses came and went, checking monitors, adjusting IV drips, making notes on charts. A doctor examined Andy's pupils with a small flashlight. Everyone spoke in hushed, professional tones that made Garrett want to scream. His mother arrived near midnight. Diane Walsh looked 10 years older than when Garrett had last seen her 2 weeks ago. Her nurse's uniform was wrinkled from the long bus ride. She didn't drive and couldn't afford a car. She took one look at Andy and made a sound like a wounded animal. Garrett caught her as her legs gave out, holding his mother while she sobbed into his shoulder. "My baby," she kept saying. "My sweet baby boy." They stayed with Andy through that first terrible night. Garrett called his foreman and quit his job over the phone. He wouldn't leave Nashville until Andy woke up. Diane used her vacation days, the ones she'd been saving for Christmas. The second day, Andy's condition remained unchanged. Stable but critical, the doctors said. No improvement, but no decline either. Garrett started investigating. He went to the motel where Andy had been staying and found the room cleared out. Andy's rent had run out weeks ago. He went to the barbecue restaurant where Andy worked and learned his brother had been fired 3 weeks earlier for showing up late and acting erratic. He was different, the manager said sadly. Jumpy, paranoid, not the sweet kid we hired. We tried to help him, but he just stopped showing up. Do you know who his friends were? Anyone he spent time with? The manager thought for a moment. There was this older guy, real slick looking. Vincent something. They'd talk in the corner booth sometimes. Your brother seemed nervous around him. Vincent. The name meant nothing to Garrett, but he wrote it down. At the venue where Andy collapsed, a small club called the Blue Moon, the owner remembered the performance. He was singing great, actually. Better than usual. Then he just stopped mid-song, grabbed his chest, fell right off the stage. Scared everyone half to death. Was he alone? Did anyone come with him? Nah, he came solo. But I'd seen him around with this manager type. Fancy dresser. Can't remember his name. Garrett's detective work painted a picture he didn't want to see. Andy had been struggling, isolated, probably broke, and someone named Vincent had been involved. On the third day, Dr. Patterson sat Garrett and Diane down for another consultation. Andy's brain activity is concerning, the doctor said quietly. The prolonged lack of oxygen during his cardiac arrests may have caused significant damage. Even if he wakes up, there's a strong possibility of permanent impairment. What kind of impairment? Diane asked, her voice barely audible. We won't know until he regains consciousness. Could be memory issues, motor function problems, speech difficulties, or it could be more severe. I'm sorry, I can't be more specific. Garrett wanted to hit something. Wanted to find this Vincent person and break every bone in his body. Wanted to turn back time and drag Andy home from Nashville the day he arrived. But all he could do was sit beside his brother's bed and wait. On the fourth day, a social worker came by. She had information about the pills found in Andy's motel room, the one he'd apparently been squatting in after being evicted. The pills had been analyzed. They weren't pure amphetamines, she explained. They'd been cut with dangerous substances to stretch the supply. This is becoming an epidemic in the music scene. Dealers prey on desperate young artists, get them hooked, then sell them increasingly dangerous products. Do you have names? Garrett demanded. Do you know who sold these to my brother? The police are investigating, but these operations are hard to trace. The dealers disappear as soon as there's trouble. On the fifth day, Garrett tracked down Summit Sound Recording, the label where Andy had auditioned. Roy Kittering remembered Andy clearly. Talented kid, Roy said. We were actually planning to call him back. We discussed it last week, thought we could work with him on developing his style, maybe offer a small contract. Garrett felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. You were going to sign him. Nothing guaranteed. But yeah, we wanted to bring him in for a second meeting. Why? Where is Marcus? Garrett couldn't speak for a moment. His brother had been so close. The dream had been within reach. If Andy had just held on a little longer, stayed clean a little longer. He's in the hospital, Garrett finally managed. Overdose. He's in a coma. Roy's face went pale. Oh God, I'm so sorry. Is there anything we can do? Yeah, tell me who Vincent Caruso is. Roy's expression darkened immediately. How do you know that name? People said Andy was spending time with him. Vincent Caruso is a parasite. He hangs around Nashville pretending to be a manager, but really, he's a dealer. He targets young artists, gets them dependent on pills, then bleeds them dry. We've tried to get him arrested, but he's slippery. Always manages to avoid prosecution. Where can I find him? I don't know, and if I did, I'd tell you to let the police handle it. Caruso is dangerous, Mr. Walsh. He's connected to some bad people. Garrett left the meeting shaking with rage. He filed a police report, gave them Vincent Caruso's name, but the detective sounded tired and jaded. We know about Caruso. Been trying to nail him for years. Unless your brother wakes up and testifies, there's not much we can do. On the sixth day, at 3:17 in the afternoon, Andy died. The machine started screaming. Nurses rushed in. Dr. Patterson performed CPR while shouting orders. Garrett and his mother were pushed into the hallway, where they clutched each other and prayed to a God who didn't seem to be listening. After 20 minutes, Dr. Patterson emerged, pulling off his latex gloves. His face told them everything before he spoke a word. I'm very sorry. We did everything we could. His heart just couldn't take any more stress. Diane collapsed. Garrett caught her again, holding his mother while his own heart shattered into a million pieces. Andy Walsh was 28 years old. He died chasing a dream in a city that chewed him up and spit him out. He died alone, without ever knowing how close he'd come to making it. He died without hearing his brother tell him one last time how much he was loved. Garrett stood in that hospital hallway, his mother sobbing in his arms, and felt something inside him die too. The boy who believed in dreams. The brother who thought love and support were enough. The man who trusted the world to be fair. All gone. All that remained was grief and rage, and a terrible, consuming need to make someone pay for what happened to Andy Walsh. Garrett buried his brother on a grey Tuesday in June. Rain fell soft and steady, turning the cemetery grass dark green and the fresh grave into mud. 23 people attended, mostly family, a few church members, and 2 of Andy's high school friends who'd driven in from Memphis. Pastor Williams spoke words that were supposed to bring comfort. Heaven, peace, God's plan. The phrases washed over Garrett like the rain, meaningless and cold. They lowered Andy into the ground in a plain pine casket, all Diane could afford even with Garrett emptying his savings account. Andy's guitar went with him, cradled against his chest. Garrett had insisted on that. His brother should have his music, even in death. After the service, people came back to the yellow house. Neighbors brought casseroles and pies, the traditional offerings of grief. They said things like, "He's in a better place," and "at least he's not suffering anymore," and "time heals all wounds." Garrett wanted to throw them all out, wanted to scream that Andy shouldn't be anywhere except alive, singing, dreaming. But he just nodded and accepted their hugs and ate nothing. His mother moved through the gathering like a ghost. She'd aged 20 years in 2 weeks. The light had gone out of her eyes, replaced by a blank emptiness that scared Garrett more than her tears had. "I have to go back to work tomorrow," she said quietly that evening, after everyone had left. They sat in the kitchen surrounded by covered dishes. "Can't afford to take more time. Mama, you just buried your son, and I still have bills to pay. The hospital bills alone. She laughed, a bitter sound with no humor in it. $26,000 to watch my baby die. Isn't that something? Garrett felt the number like a physical blow. 26,000. His mother made 18,000 a year as a nurse. They'd be paying this debt for the rest of their lives. I'll help, he said. I'll get another construction job, send you money. You can't fix this, Garrett. Diane looked at him with eyes that had seen too much pain. Some things can't be fixed. They just have to be survived. She went to bed early, moving slow like every step hurt. Garrett sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the sympathy casseroles, and felt rage building in his chest like a pressure cooker. Vincent Caruso had killed Andy as surely as if he'd put a gun to his head. And Vincent was still out there, still free, probably already finding his next victim. Garrett found a mostly empty bottle of whiskey in the cabinet above the refrigerator. Something left over from Christmas 2 years ago. He'd never been much of a drinker. Neither had Marcus. Their father had been before the accident, and they'd both seen what alcohol could do. But tonight, Garrett needed something to dull the razor-sharp edges of his grief. He poured 3 fingers into a juice glass and drank it fast. The whiskey burned, going down, settled hot in his empty stomach. He poured another, then another. The kitchen got fuzzy around the edges. The terrible tightness in his chest loosened slightly. For the first time in 2 weeks, Garrett could breathe without feeling like he was drowning. He started drinking every night. Just a little at first, 1 or 2 glasses to help him sleep. But sleep brought nightmares. Andy calling for help. Andy dying alone. Andy's grey face on that hospital pillow. So Garrett started drinking more. Enough to pass out instead of sleep. Enough to not dream. He got a new construction job, but his hands shook on the tools. His foreman had to correct his measurements twice in one day, something that had never happened before. Garrett, who'd been meticulous and reliable, started making careless mistakes. "You doing okay, Walsh?" his foreman asked. "I heard about your brother. If you need more time..." "I'm fine," Garrett snapped. "Just leave me alone." But he wasn't fine. He was the opposite of fine. He stopped calling friends, stopped going to the diner where he used to eat breakfast, stopped doing anything except work, drink, and stare at the walls of his apartment. His mother called every Sunday, but their conversations got shorter and shorter. "Are you taking care of yourself?" she'd ask. "Yeah, Mama." "You? Getting by?" That's all any of us can do. Neither of them mentioned Andy directly. His name had become a wound too painful to touch. 3 months after the funeral, Garrett was fired. He'd shown up to work drunk, and when his foreman confronted him, Garrett had shoved him. Security escorted Garrett off the site. 27 years old, and he couldn't keep a job. He burned through his remaining savings in 6 weeks. Rent came due, and he couldn't pay. His landlord, a woman named Mrs. Chen, who'd always been kind, gave him 2 weeks extension out of sympathy. "I'm sorry about your brother," she said, "but I have my own bills, Mr. Walsh. You understand?" Garrett understood. He understood that the world kept turning, even when your whole life had stopped. He understood that grief wasn't an excuse for anything. He understood that Andy was gone, and nothing would ever be right again. He started selling his possessions. The TV went first, then his good tools, then the watch their father had left him. Each item bought another week's rent, another bottle, another day of not having to face reality. One night, drunk and desperate, Garrett went to Andy's room in their mother's house. Diane had left it exactly as it was, the bed still made, posters of musicians still on the walls, old cassette tapes still stacked on the dresser. Garrett sat on the bed and looked at the empty spot where Andy's guitar used to stand. He picked up one of the cassette tapes, a mix Andy had made in high school, his handwriting on the label "Songs That Matter." Garrett put it in the old boombox and pressed play. Elvis Presley's voice filled the room. That smooth, powerful voice singing about tender love. Andy had loved this song, had practiced it 1,000 times trying to capture that same emotion. The grief crashed over Garrett like a tidal wave. He grabbed the boombox and threw it against the wall. Plastic shattered. The tape spilled out in ribbons of brown magnetic film. "I hate you," Garrett screamed at nothing, at everything. "I hate this. I hate that you're gone. I hate that some drug dealer is still out there. I hate that nobody cares. He couldn't finish. He collapsed on Andy's bed and sobbed until his throat was raw and his eyes were swollen shut. When he could breathe again, Garrett looked at the broken boombox, at the ruined tape, and felt something shift in his chest. The grief was still there, would always be there, but underneath it, burning hot and bright, was rage. Rage at Vincent Caruso, who'd never been caught, who'd never faced any consequences. Rage at the music industry that created the pressure, the desperation, the market for pills that killed dreamers. Rage at Nashville, at the whole system that chewed up boys like Andy and spit them out broken. And rage, irrational, unfair, but burning nonetheless, at Elvis Presley. Elvis, who'd made fame look glamorous. Elvis, who'd shown poor Southern boys that they could be kings if they just sang pretty enough. Elvis, who'd built an empire on the dreams of kids like Andy, without ever warning them about the cost. Garrett knew it was crazy. Elvis Presley didn't kill Marcus. Elvis didn't even know Andy existed. But grief wasn't logical, and rage needed a target. Andy had died trying to be like Elvis, had died chasing a dream that Elvis embodied, had died in a system that Elvis helped create. In his twisted, alcohol-soaked logic, Garrett convinced himself that confronting Elvis, making him understand what his dream cost ordinary people, would give Andy's death meaning, would make the pain make sense. He started following news about Elvis. Read that the King was doing a residency in Las Vegas. Big comeback tour, 20,000 seats per show. Tickets were expensive, but Garrett had one thing left to sell. Andy's guitar. He'd kept it from the funeral home, couldn't bear to let it be buried. It sat in his apartment closet, a reminder of everything lost. Garrett pulled it out and looked at it for a long time. An old Yamaha acoustic, scratched and worn from years of practice. Andy had saved for 8 months to buy it when he was 6. "I'm sorry," Garrett whispered to the guitar, to Andy's memory, to the universe. "I'm sorry, but I have to do this. I have to make someone understand." He sold the guitar to a pawn shop for $300, a fraction of what it was worth, but enough for a bus ticket to Vegas and a ticket to Elvis's show. The pawn shop owner, a grizzled man with kind eyes, looked at Garrett with concern. "You sure about this, son? This guitar's got history. You might regret selling it." "I already regret everything," Garrett said. His friend Lyle from the old construction crew tried to talk him out of going to Vegas. "What are you gonna do, Garrett? Yell at Elvis? That won't bring Andy back. You need help, man. Real help. Maybe talk to someone, get into a program." "I don't need a program. I need someone to pay attention. I need someone to care that my brother died. Elvis Presley doesn't know you. He's not gonna care." "Then I'll make him care," Garrett said, taking another drink from the flask he now carried everywhere. Lyle shook his head sadly. "You're gonna end up in jail. Or worse." "Don't care." And he didn't. Garrett had lost everything that mattered. His brother, his job, his savings, his mother's light, his own sense of purpose. What did jail matter compared to that? The night before leaving for Vegas, Garrett visited Andy's grave. Someone, probably their mother, had placed fresh flowers. The headstone was simple: Andy Edward Walsh, 1946-1974. Beloved son and brother. His song continues. Garrett sat on the damp grass and opened a new bottle of whiskey. "I'm going to Vegas, little brother," he said to the stone. "I'm going to make Elvis Presley understand what happened to you. I'm going to make him see that his dream kills people like us." The grave didn't answer. Wind rustled the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. "I know you'd tell me not to do this. You'd say it's not Elvis's fault, that I'm just hurting and looking for someone to blame." "You'd be right." Garrett took a long drink. "But I can't just let it go, Marcus. I can't just move on like you never mattered. Someone has to pay. Someone has to know your name." He stayed until the bottle was empty and the moon was high. Then he drove home, drunk, reckless, not caring if he crashed. He made it somehow, passed out on his couch, still wearing his shoes. The next morning, hungover and hollow, Garrett packed a small bag. He left a note for his mother, though he didn't know what to say. "Gone to Vegas. Don't worry. Love you." Inadequate words for an impossible situation. The bus ride took 18 hours. Garrett drank whenever the driver stopped, smuggling small bottles aboard, trying to keep the shaking in his hands under control. Las Vegas rose from the desert like a fever dream, all lights and noise and desperate glamour. It was the opposite of everything Andy had been. Pure and honest and real. This city was fake, artificial, built on broken dreams and empty promises. Perfect, Garrett thought bitterly. Perfect place for Elvis Presley. He checked into the cheapest motel he could find, $40 a night, stained carpet, a view of a parking lot. He bought his ticket to the show from a scalper, paying twice the face value because the concert was sold out. The night of the performance, Garrett started drinking early. He needed the courage, needed the numbness, needed something to quiet the small voice in his head that said this was wrong, stupid. By the time he arrived at the Las Vegas Hilton, he was drunk enough to be brave and sober enough to be furious. 20,000 people in evening wear, laughing and excited, ready to worship their king. None of them knew Andy's name. None of them cared about one more dead dreamer from Tennessee. But they would care. Garrett would make them care. He'd make Elvis Presley care, even if it destroyed him in the process. 3 weeks before that fateful August night, Elvis Presley sat alone in his suite at the Las Vegas Hilton, staring at a photograph he'd been looking at for an hour. The picture showed a young woman with dark hair and gentle eyes. His mother, Gladys. She died 16 years ago when Elvis was 23, and not a day passed that he didn't miss her. "What would you think of me now, Mama?" he whispered to the photograph. The suite was enormous. 3 bedrooms, marble bathrooms, a living room bigger than the entire house he'd grown up in back in Tupelo, Mississippi. Gold records lined the walls. Awards cluttered the shelves. Evidence of success everywhere. But Elvis felt like a prisoner. He was 39 years old, divorced, struggling with his weight, and exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. The lights, the crowds, the constant performances, it all felt like a machine that wouldn't stop grinding. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, quickly setting the photograph face down. Red West entered, Elvis's bodyguard, childhood friend, and one of the few people who knew the real man behind the legend. Red was built like a linebacker, loyal as a hound dog, and currently looking at Elvis with concern written all over his face. "You taking those pills again?" Red asked without preamble. They'd been friends too long for polite dancing around problems. Elvis stood up from the couch, his movements slower than they used to be. "I don't know what you're talking about, EP. I was born at night, but not last night. I've known you since we were kids. I can tell when you're using. They're prescribed, Red. Doctor's orders. You want me to perform every night feeling like death. The pills help me focus, give me energy. They're killing you." Red's voice was flat, stating a fact. You're heavier than you've ever been. You're paranoid. You can't sleep without taking something else. This ain't sustainable. Elvis felt anger flare, the quick temper that came easier these days. You want to tell me how to live my life? You work for me, remember? Red didn't flinch. I'm your friend first, employee second. And as your friend, I'm telling you that you're headed for a cliff. The anger drained as quickly as it came, leaving Elvis feeling hollow. He sank back onto the couch. I know, he admitted quietly. I know, Red. But I don't know how to stop. The shows, the expectations, everyone depending on me. Nobody's depending on you to kill yourself, aren't they? Elvis laughed bitterly. Colonel Parker's got me booked solid through next year. There's the tour, the recordings, the movies people want me to make. If I stop, if I slow down, what happens to all those people on my payroll? What happens to the fans who bought tickets? What happens to Elvis? Red countered. That's what you should be asking. They sat in silence for a moment. Through the windows, Las Vegas glittered below them, a city that never slept, never stopped, never questioned whether all the brightness was worth the cost. My mama used to say that fame was a blessing and a curse, Elvis said softly. I used to think she was wrong. How could singing for people, making them happy, be a curse? Now I understand. The blessing is the music, the connection with the audience. The curse is everything else. The pressure, the loneliness, the feeling that you're not a person anymore, just a thing people consume. Red sat down beside him. You could take a break, real break, not just a couple days. Go somewhere quiet, get healthy, remember why you started singing in the first place. Can't. Got the residency here through September, then the tour. Then Elvis waved his hand vaguely. There's always something, always another obligation. Another knock at the door. This time it was Charlie Hodge, another member of Elvis's inner circle, carrying a stack of papers. Boss, got some things that need your signature. Contract extensions, appearance agreements, the usual. Elvis took the papers without looking at them and signed where Charlie pointed. His whole life reduced to signatures on contracts, agreements to be somewhere, do something, perform on command. After Charlie left, Red tried again. At least talk to a real doctor. Not one of these pill pushers who'll give you anything you ask for. Someone who'll tell you the truth. I know the truth, Red. I'm tired. I'm trapped. And I don't know how to get out without letting everyone down. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the backup singers for that evening's rehearsal. 3 talented women, Teresa, Sylvia, and Kathy, who brought their own microphones and sheet music. Elvis pulled himself together, put on the public face, became the Elvis Presley everyone expected. Charming, energetic, larger than life. But during a break in rehearsal, young Teresa approached him. She was 22, fresh-faced, with dreams still shining in her eyes. She reminded Elvis painfully of himself at that age. Mr. Presley, can I tell you something? She asked shyly. Course, darling. And call me Elvis. My daddy was in Vietnam. He came home in 1971, and he was broken, you know. Couldn't sleep, couldn't work, couldn't hardly talk to us. The doctors called it shell shock or trauma or something. He'd just sit in his chair all day staring at nothing. Elvis listened, really listened. He'd heard thousands of stories from fans over the years, but something about Teresa's earnestness caught him. One day, Mama played your gospel album, Teresa continued. Just put it on the record player while she was cooking, and Daddy started crying. First emotion we'd seen from him in months. He played that album every single day for a year. Slowly, bit by bit, he came back to us. Your music helped him find his way home. She smiled, tears in her eyes. He's okay now. Works at the post office, coaches Little League, laughs at Mama's jokes, and he says it was your voice that reminded him life could still be beautiful. So I just wanted to say thank you. You saved my daddy's life. Elvis felt something crack inside his chest. This was why he sang. Not for the money, or the fame, or the sold-out shows. For moments like this, where music became medicine, where a voice could pull someone back from darkness. Your daddy sounds like a brave man, Elvis said, his voice rough with emotion. And you tell him Elvis Presley is honored to have helped, even a little bit. After rehearsal ended and everyone left, Elvis sat alone again with his thoughts. Teresa's story had touched something deep, reminded him of the pure purpose that had started everything. He'd grown up dirt poor in Mississippi, singing in church because it made his mama happy. Music had been joy, not obligation. Connection, not performance. When had it all gotten so complicated? Elvis walked to the window and looked out at the Vegas Strip. Thousands of people down there, each with their own stories, their own pain, their own need for something beautiful to believe in. He thought about Teresa's father, saved by gospel music. Thought about all the letters he received from fans saying his songs got them through divorces, deaths, deployments, depression. The music mattered. It still mattered, but Red was right too. Elvis couldn't keep destroying himself to create that music. The pills, the weight, the exhaustion. Something had to change. He picked up the phone and called his personal physician, Dr. Nekopoulos. Doc, I need to talk to you about the medication. Not now, after the Vegas residency ends. But I think I need to make some changes. That's good, Elvis, real good. We'll work on a plan together. After hanging up, Elvis felt slightly lighter. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. An acknowledgement that the current path led nowhere good. He picked up his mother's photograph again. I'm trying, Mama. I know I've lost my way some, but I'm trying to find it again. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of performances. Elvis sang his heart out every night. Suspicious Minds, Burning Love, Can't Help Falling in Love. The crowd screamed their approval. The reviews called him electrifying. But backstage, alone in his dressing room, Elvis felt the weight of it all pressing down. The pills helped him get through the shows, but they were also slowly killing him. He knew it. Red knew it. Probably everyone around him knew it. The night before the fateful August performance, Elvis had a dream about his mother. She was young in the dream, the way she looked when he was a boy. They were sitting on the porch of their old Tupelo house, and she was singing a hymn in her sweet, clear voice. Mama, I don't know if I can keep doing this, Dream Elvis said. Dream Gladys smiled and touched his face. Baby, you just remember why you started, not for the fame. Not for the money, for the love, for the connection. When you forget that, you lose yourself. I think I already have lost myself. Then find yourself again. It's never too late, son. Never too late to come home to who you really are. Elvis woke up with tears on his face. The dream felt so real he could almost smell his mother's perfume. That morning he looked at himself in the mirror, really looked. Saw the puffiness from the pills, the tiredness in his eyes, the heaviness that wasn't just physical. He saw a man who'd achieved everything he'd dreamed of and somehow ended up feeling empty. Tonight, he told his reflection, tonight I perform for the right reasons, not because I have to, because I want to, because the music still matters. He didn't know that in less than 24 hours a grieving, drunk stranger would stumble onto his stage and force him to confront everything he'd been trying to ignore. He didn't know that Garrett Walsh existed, or that Andy Walsh had died, or that his own struggle with fame and pills was about to collide with someone else's tragedy. He just knew that something had to change. He couldn't keep living like this, half alive, going through the motions, slowly destroying himself to maintain an image. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was tired of his throne, and he was desperately searching for a way to be human again. The Las Vegas Hilton International Theater hummed with anticipation. 20,000 people filled every seat, from the orchestra level to the balconies that seemed to touch the ceiling. Women wore sequin dresses that caught the lights. Men adjusted their bow ties and checked their watches. Everyone had paid good money to see the king. Garrett Walsh stood near the back of the orchestra section, swaying slightly. He'd bought 6 small bottles of whiskey from a liquor store down the street and finished 4 of them already. The theater spun gently around him, all those glittering aiding blurring into a mass of wealth and carelessness. Nobody here knew Marcus. Nobody here cared about one more dead dreamer from Tennessee. "You okay, buddy?" The man in the next seat leaned away slightly, smelling the alcohol. "Fine," Garrett slurred. "Just fine." The lights dimmed. The crowd erupted in screams and applause. Garrett's hands clenched into fists. Elvis walked onto the stage in a white jumpsuit covered in rhinestones and golden eagles. Even drunk, even angry, Garrett couldn't deny the presence of the man. Elvis moved like he owned the space, like the spotlight had been invented just for him. The band kicked in, drums thundering, guitars wailing. Elvis grabbed the microphone and started singing, his voice filling every corner of the massive room. The crowd went wild. Garrett watched, his vision blurring, his heart pounding with rage and grief and whiskey. This man, this rich, famous, successful man, had everything. Mansions and cars and women screaming his name. While Andy lay cold in the ground, his dreams turned to ash. It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. Elvis moved through song after song, fast numbers that got the crowd dancing, slow ballads that made women cry. He was a professional, hitting every note, charming everyone with stories between songs. "Y'all having a good time tonight?" Elvis asked. And 20,000 people screamed yes. Garrett took another drink, his 5th bottle. The anger in his chest burned hotter than the whiskey. During a brief pause while the band set up for the next number, Elvis walked to the edge of the stage. "Anyone out there celebrating something special tonight? Anniversary? Earth?" People shouted out their occasions. Elvis pointed to a couple in the front row. 50 years married. "That's beautiful, folks. That's what it's all about. Real love, real commitment." Something snapped in Garrett's head. Real love, real commitment. Andy had loved music with real commitment, and where had it gotten him? Dead at 28, alone in a Nashville hospital room. Elvis started his next song, one of his famous ballads. The crowd swayed, holding up lighters. The moment was perfect, magical, exactly what everyone had paid to see. Garrett pushed past the people in his row, stumbling over feet and purses. Someone protested, but he ignored them. The whiskey gave him courage and stole his judgment. He made it to the aisle and started walking toward the stage. Security guards stood at intervals, but they were watching for different kinds of trouble. Overeager fans trying to rush the stage during upbeat numbers, not drunk men during slow songs. Garrett reached the orchestra pit. The stage rose above him, maybe 4 feet high. He could see Elvis clearly now, the sweat on his face, the concentration as he sang, the way his hands moved expressively. During the instrumental break, while Elvis stepped back to let his guitarist solo, Garrett grabbed the edge of the stage and hauled himself up. His boots scraped against the polished wood. His vision swam. The guitarist noticed him first and missed a note. The drummer's rhythm faltered. Elvis turned, still holding his microphone, and saw Garrett rising onto the stage apron. The music stopped completely. The silence was deafening. 20,000 people gasped as one. Garrett swayed on the edge of the stage, his work shirt wrinkled and stained, his face red from alcohol and emotion. Elvis stood frozen, microphone in hand, staring at this stranger who'd interrupted his carefully choreographed show. Garrett pointed a shaking finger at the king of rock and roll. "You." The word came out louder than he intended, echoing through the sound system. "You ain't nothing but a fake." The crowd erupted in boos and angry shouts. Security guards started moving from both sides of the theater, their radios crackling. But Garrett wasn't done. 6 months of grief, 3 months of drinking, weeks of obsessive rage. It all came pouring out. "My brother could sing better than you," Garrett shouted, tears streaming down his face now. "And he's dead. Dead because of people like you." A woman in the balcony screamed. Men stood up, ready to intervene. The boos grew louder, a wave of disapproval crashing over Garrett. 2 security guards reached the stage steps, moving fast. They were seconds away from grabbing this drunk fool and throwing him into the Vegas heat. Elvis raised his hand. One simple gesture, palm out, fingers spread. The security guards stopped like they'd hit an invisible wall. The booing faded to confused murmurs. Even Garrett seemed surprised, his arms still pointing but trembling harder now. The spotlight caught both of them, the superstar in his jeweled jumpsuit and the broken man in work clothes. 2 people from different worlds connected by this impossible moment. Elvis didn't move, didn't speak. Just looked at Garrett with an expression that was hard to read under the stage lights. 5 seconds passed. 10. The entire theater held its breath. Garrett's finger was still pointing, but his arm dropped slightly. Up close, the people in the front rows could see this wasn't just some drunk causing trouble. His face was wet with tears. His whole body shook with something deeper than alcohol. "You don't even care," Garrett said, his voice breaking. The microphone caught it, sent it through the speakers. "You just sing your songs and take your money. And boys like my Marcus, they die trying to be like you." Marcus. The name hung in the air like a prayer and an accusation all at once. Elvis's grip tightened on his microphone. His band members looked at each other, uncertain. The backup singers stood frozen in their sparkly dresses. Red West appeared in the wings, his face hard and professional. He'd handled situations like this before. Crazy fans, troublemakers, people who wanted their moment with Elvis. He knew exactly what to do. He started toward the stage, ready to remove this drunk before things got worse. But Elvis shook his head slightly, a small gesture that only Red could see. "Wait." The crowd shifted uncomfortably in their velvet seats. This wasn't part of the show. This wasn't the entertainment they'd paid for. Some people wanted the drunk removed. Others leaned forward, sensing that something real was happening, something unrehearsed. Garrett's legs wobbled. He grabbed the microphone stand near him to keep from falling. "You don't know what it's like," he said, quieter now, but the microphone still caught every word. "To watch someone you love destroy themselves chasing a dream, to hold their hand while machines keep them breathing, to bury them and know it was all for nothing." His voice cracked completely on the last word. He looked at Elvis through tears and whiskey and 6 months of unbearable pain. And he just wanted to matter, just wanted to make music that helped people. Like you did. Like you used to. Before you became this. Garrett gestured vaguely at the stage, the theater, the whole glittering Vegas spectacle. 20,000 people watched Elvis Presley's face as he processed these words. Some expected him to call security, to dismiss this interruption and get back to the show. Others held their breath. Wait. Elvis stood at the edge of the stage, 3 feet from this grieving, drunken stranger. The king and the broken man caught in the same pool of light. The band stayed silent. The crowd stayed silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to quiet, waiting for Elvis's response. Red West took another step toward the stage, his hand moving to his radio. This had gone on long enough. Time to remove the drunk and let Elvis continue performing. But before Red could speak into his radio, before security could move, before the moment could end, Elvis Presley did something nobody in that theater expected. He walked toward Garrett Walsh, not away, to. The crowd made a collective sound, part gasp, part whisper, part disbelief. What was Elvis thinking? The man could be dangerous, could have a weapon, could be completely unstable. But Elvis kept walking until he stood at the very edge of the stage, directly in front of where Garrett swayed and wept. They were close enough to touch now, close enough to see each other's eyes clearly under the hot light. Elvis's face showed something the audience couldn't quite read. Not anger, not fear. Something else. Something deeper. The microphone in Elvis's hand was still on. Every person in the theater would hear whatever he said next. 20,000 people leaned forward in their seats. Red West froze in the wings, his hand on his radio but not pressing the button. The band members held their instruments, waiting. Garrett looked up at Elvis through blurred vision, expecting anger, expecting to be thrown out, expecting nothing good. And Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, opened his mouth to speak. What he said next would change everything. Elvis knelt down at the edge of the stage. The movement shocked everyone. The king of rock and roll, in his rhinestone-studded jumpsuit worth thousands of dollars, getting down on one knee on the polished stage floor. His face was now level with Garrett's, close enough that the microphone picked up his breathing. "What was your brother's name?" Elvis asked quietly. The question hit Garrett like a physical blow. Of all the things he'd expected, anger, dismissal, security dragging him away, he never expected this. Never expected Elvis Presley to ask about Andy like he was a real person who met. Garrett's mouth opened but no sound came out at first. Then, stammering, "M. Marcus, Andy Walsh. How did you lose him?" Elvis's voice was gentle, compassionate, and the microphone carried it to every corner of the massive theater. Something broke inside Garrett. The dam he'd been building for 6 months, made of whiskey and rage and stubborn refusal to fully feel the loss, suddenly crumbled. "Pills," Garrett choked out. "Some dealer in Nashville got him hooked on pills. Said all the professionals used them. Said it was the only way to make it in the music business. And he just wanted to sing. He had this voice, this beautiful voice, and he practiced every day. He was good. He was really good." The words came faster now, tumbling over each other. 6 months of grief and guilt and anger pouring out in front of 20,000 strangers. He went to Nashville in March. Had an audition. They told him he needed to be more like you, or less like you. They couldn't even decide. He got confused. Got desperate. This man, Vincent Caruso, he pretended to be a manager, but he just destroyed my brother. Garrett's legs finally gave out completely. He sat down hard on the stage apron, his boots dangling over the edge. Tears ran freely down his face. He didn't care anymore who saw, who judged. Andy died in a hospital in May, come for 6 days. Never woke up. Never knew that the record label was gonna call him back, that he was close to making it. He died alone and scared, and I couldn't save him. His voice broke into sobs. I was supposed to protect him. I'm his big brother. That's my job. And I let him go to that city, and I let him die, and now he's gone. And I can't. He couldn't finish. Just sat there crying, broken and drunk and devastated. The theater was absolutely silent. 20,000 people watching this raw, ugly grief spill out on stage. Some women in the audience were crying too, their mascara running. Men shifted uncomfortably, moved by this man's pain. Elvis stayed kneeling. He let Garrett cry, didn't rush him, didn't try to fix it with quick words. He just stayed present, his face showing genuine emotion. Finally, Elvis spoke again. His voice was thick, like he was fighting his own tears. "I want everyone here to know something." He stood slowly, still looking at Garrett, but speaking to the whole theater. "This man's pain is real. His brother Andy died chasing a dream that I helped sell to the world, and he's right to be angry." The crowd murmured in confusion. What was Elvis saying? Elvis turned to face the audience fully now, still holding his microphone. "We sell dreams in this business. We make it look easy and glamorous and magical. We don't talk about the cost, the pressure, the loneliness, the pills that keep you performing when your body's screaming to stop, the dealers who prey on desperate kids who just want their shot." His voice grew stronger, more passionate. "How many Andy Walshes are out there? How many talented kids have we lost to this system? How many more will we lose before we admit that something's broken?" Red West stood in the wings, his mouth slightly open. In all his years with Elvis, he'd never heard him speak this honestly in public. Elvis looked back at Garrett. "Your brother didn't die because of me directly, but he died because of a system I'm part of. A system that tells people they're not enough unless they're stars. That sells success without warning about the price. That lets predators like this Vincent Caruso operate because nobody wants to acknowledge the ugly parts of the dream." He paused, wiping his own eyes quickly. "I've lost people too. Friends who got caught up in this life. My mama, she died young, and I've always wondered if the stress of my fame contributed. I've been where Andy was, taking pills to keep going, to meet everyone's expectations. And there have been nights, a lot of nights lately, when I've wondered if any of this is worth it." The audience sat in stunned silence. Elvis Presley, admitting vulnerability, admitting doubt, admitting that the dream had darkness in it. "Andy Walsh deserved better," Elvis said firmly. "He deserved real support, not exploitation. He deserved honest guidance, not dealers disguised as managers. And his memory deserves more than us just moving on and pretending nothing's wrong." Then Elvis did something that made the theater erupt in gasps. He turned to his business manager, who was standing in the wings, looking pale. "Joe, how much does this show make tonight?" Joe stammered. Probably around 300,000 after expenses." "All of it," Elvis interrupted. "Every penny from tonight's show goes to establish the Andy Walsh Foundation. We're going to help struggling musicians get real support. Counseling, education about the dangers, protection from the predators, real mentorship, not false promises and pills." The crowd erupted, some in applause, others in shocked whispers. $300,000 was a fortune. Elvis was serious, but he wasn't finished. He turned back to Garrett, who was staring at him like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. "Your brother had a dream," Elvis said, kneeling down again so they were eye level. "Don't let his death make you forget that dreams can also be beautiful. They can lift people up. They can heal. I've seen it. I just heard a story this week about a veteran who music helped save. Dreams aren't the enemy. The people who exploit those dreams." Elvis reached out and put a hand on Garrett's shoulder. "Tell me about Marcus. Not how he died. Tell everyone here who he really was. What made him special. Let us know him." Garrett looked at Elvis's hand on his shoulder. Looked at his face, seeing genuine compassion there. Looked out at 20,000 people who'd been ready to boo him off the stage, but were now silent. "Wait, he sang at church. Garrett said shakily, his voice amplified by Elvis's microphone. "Every Sunday. This little church in Knoxville, maybe 60 people. Andy didn't care about the small audience. He sang like he was performing for thousands. He sang like it mattered." Elvis nodded encouragingly. "Tell us more." "When our dad died, mining accident 5 years ago, Andy sang at the funeral. He chose one of your songs, actually. The tender one, about love. People said it was the most beautiful thing they'd ever heard. He made everyone cry, but they were good tears, you know, healing tears." Garrett's voice grew steadier as he talked about Andy the person, not Andy the victim. He worked at a diner, saved every penny, helped Mama with bills even though he barely made anything. He'd make up silly songs to make kids laugh. He was kind. He was good. He just wanted to make music that mattered, that helped people feel less alone. "He sounds like someone I would have liked to meet," Elvis said softly. "Someone I would have been honored to know." Garrett looked at Elvis with red, swollen eyes. "He loved your music, played your songs over and over, trying to learn. Not to copy you, he knew he could never be you. He just wanted to understand what made the music work, what made it connect with people." Elvis stood and offered his hand to Garrett. "Come up here properly. Stand with me." Garrett hesitated. Security was still hovering at the edges. The crowd was still watching, uncertain. But Elvis kept his hand extended, patient and genuine. Finally, Garrett took the offered hand. Elvis pulled him up onto the main stage. They stood together under the lights, the superstar and the grieving brother, connected by tragedy and unexpected understanding. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. The moment felt too raw, too real for typical theater reactions. Elvis spoke to the crowd again. "I want to make something clear. What happened to Andy Walsh is a tragedy. But it's not an isolated tragedy. It's happening every day in Nashville, in Memphis, in Los Angeles, in every city where kids go to chase their dreams, and we, all of us who benefit from this industry, have a responsibility to do better." He looked at his band, at his backup singers, at Red West in the wings. "No more looking away, no more pretending it's not our problem. Starting tonight, things change. At least in my corner of this business, things change." Then Elvis turned to Garrett one more time. "Your brother loved music. He loved performing. And that love, that's what should be honored. Not the tragedy, not the way he died. The love." Elvis gestured to his band. "You know the tender song you sang at your father's funeral? The one by me?" Garrett nodded, confused. "I want you to sing it now. Here. For Marcus. For your mother. For everyone who loved him. And for yourself. Because you need to remember that your brother's dream was beautiful, even if the ending was tragic." "I can't," Garrett protested, suddenly sober with panic. "I'm not a singer. I'm drunk. I can't." "Yes, you can," Elvis said firmly. "This isn't about being perfect. This is about love. About remembering. About honoring your brother the right way." Garrett shook his head violently. "I can't do this. I'm not Marcus. I don't have his gift. I'll ruin it." "You won't ruin anything," Elvis said gently but firmly. He handed his own microphone to Garrett. The weight of it felt impossible, like holding the sun. Elvis turned to his band leader. "Play it slow. Give him space. Follow his lead, not the other way around." The band leader nodded. The musicians adjusted their positions, ready to support this broken man who'd stumbled onto their stage. Elvis stepped back but didn't leave. He stayed close, a silent presence of support. Red West remained in the wings, his radio silent now. The security guards stood down complete. 20,000 people waited. Some were annoyed. They'd paid to see Elvis, not some drunk stranger. Others were moved, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. The theater felt charged with possibility and tension. Garrett looked out at the sea of faces. The lights were so bright he could barely see past the first few rows. His hands trembled. His throat felt tight with emotion and alcohol. "I don't know if I remember all the words," he whispered, but the microphone caught it. "Then sing the ones you do remember," Elvis said from beside him. "Andy will know what you meant." The piano started first, soft, gentle notes that Garrett recognized immediately. The song Andy had sung at their father's funeral. The song about tender, lasting love. The song that had made the whole church weep. Garrett closed his eyes, took a breath, and began to sing. His voice was nothing like Marcus's. It was rough, untrained, cracking with emotion. He missed notes, forgot words, and hummed through sections. His timing was off, struggling to match the band. But it was real. It was honest. It was love made audible. He sang about love being tender, about taking someone's hand and heart forever. He sang about how some things are meant to be, how falling in love is destiny. The words were simple but profound, especially coming from a man who'd lost the person he loved most. Tears streamed down Garrett's face as he sang. His voice broke completely on certain phrases, and he had to stop and breathe before continuing. The band adjusted around him, slowing down when he needed space, supporting him when he faltered. In the audience, people started crying. Women dabbed at their eyes with tissues, men cleared their throats and looked away. This wasn't a performance, it was witnessing someone's grief transformed into something sacred. Garrett sang the verse about not being able to help falling in love. His voice was barely more than a whisper now, the microphone picking up every breath, every sob. He sang it for Marcus, for their father, for their mother sitting alone in Tennessee, for every dream that died too young. When he reached the end, his voice gave out completely. He just stood there, tears running down his face, holding the microphone like a lifeline. The theater was silent for 3 heartbeats. Then 20,000 people rose to their feet as one. The applause was deafening. It wasn't polite theater applause, it was raw, emotional. A collective release of feeling. People clapped and cried at the same time. Some whistled, others just stood with their hands over their hearts, too moved to make sound. Garrett stood frozen, overwhelmed. He'd expected to be thrown out, arrested, humiliated. Instead, thousands of strangers were honoring his brother's memory. Elvis stepped forward and embraced Garrett. A real hug, not a performance for the cameras. He held this broken man while he sobbed, while the audience continued applauding, while something fundamental shifted in the massive theater. "Andy would be so proud of you," Elvis whispered in Garrett's ear, quiet enough that the microphone didn't catch it. "That took more courage than anything I've ever done on this stage." When they finally separated, Elvis turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, Garrett Walsh, singing for his brother Marcus." The applause swelled again. Garrett stood there drunk and devastated, and somehow lighter than he'd been in months. The rage that had driven him here had transformed into something else. Not happiness. The grief was still there, would always be there, but acknowledgement. Witnessing. His brother's life and death had been seen by 20,000 people. Andy's name had been spoken. His story had been heard. He mattered. Elvis gestured for Garrett to sit on one of the stage equipment cases. "Stay here, I'm not done yet." Garrett sat, his legs too shaky to support him anyway. Elvis turned back to the audience, his expression serious. "I need to tell you all something I've never said publicly before," Elvis began. "Something my people have been advising me to keep quiet about. But tonight, seeing Garrett's courage, Hearing about Marcus, I realize silence is part of the problem. Red West in the wings tensed. He had a feeling he knew where this was going. I take pills, Elvis said simply. Prescription pills given to me by doctors, but pills nonetheless. Amphetamines to keep me energized for performances. Sleeping pills to help me rest after shows. Pills to manage pain. Pills to manage anxiety. I've been taking them for years. The audience murmured, shocked. This wasn't the kind of thing celebrities admitted. I've told myself they're different from street drugs. But because a doctor prescribes them, they're safe. But Andy Walsh took prescribed pills too. They killed him anyway. The pills don't care if they're legal. They still destroy your body. They still steal your life. Elvis's voice grew more passionate, more urgent. I'm standing here tonight, 39 years old, and I'm tired in a way that sleep can't fix. I'm heavier than I've ever been. I can't remember the last time I felt truly healthy, and I know that if I don't change something, I'm headed down the same path Andy took. The confession hung in the air. Elvis Presley, the king, admitting vulnerability and struggle in front of thousands. The industry did this to me just like it did to Marcus. The pressure to perform every night, to never show weakness, to be larger than life even when you're dying inside. The managers and promoters who care more about ticket sales than the human beings making the music. The doctors who'll prescribe anything if you pay them enough. He looked at Garrett, then back at the audience. But I'm also complicit. I took the pills. I made the choices. I prioritized fame over health, image over truth. And if I'm honest, part of me has been okay with slowly destroying myself because I didn't know how to stop without disappointing everyone. A woman in the front row called out, "We love you, Elvis. We don't need you to destroy yourself." Elvis smiled sadly. "Thank you, darling. But the system doesn't work that way. The system wants you to give everything until there's nothing left. It wants Andy Walsh's and Elvis Presley's to burn bright and burn out, because that's profitable." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Tonight changes things for me. I can't control the whole industry, but I can control my choices. After this Vegas residency ends, I'm taking time off, real time. I'm getting healthy. I'm finding doctors who'll actually help me, not just prescribe what I ask for. I'm going to remember why I started singing in the first place, because music made me feel alive, not because it was killing me." The audience erupted in supportive applause, but Elvis raised his hand for quiet. "There's something else, something I found out earlier today that Garrett doesn't know yet." Garrett looked up, confused and exhausted. Elvis gestured to Red West, who brought over a manila folder. Elvis opened it carefully. "When you mentioned your brother's name earlier, I had Red make some calls while we were up here. Called in some favors with people I know in Nashville. We tracked down information about Andy's last weeks." Garrett's heart started pounding. What could they have found? Elvis pulled out papers from the folder. "This is from Summit Sound Recording, the label where Andy auditioned." He held up a document so the audience could see, though they couldn't read it from their seats. "This is a contract offer dated May 20th, 1 week before Andy died." Garrett stood up so fast he nearly fell over. "What?" "Andy got the record deal," Elvis said, his voice thick with emotion. "They were going to sign him. The paperwork was being drawn up when he died. Garrett, your brother made it. He achieved his dream." The words didn't make sense at first. Garrett's alcohol-fogged brain struggled to process them. Andy had the deal? Andy was going to be signed? But he died before they could tell him, Garrett whispered. "Yes, and there's more." Elvis pulled out another document, handwritten pages. "This is a letter Andy wrote to the label but never sent. We found it in his motel room belongings that were in storage." Elvis began reading, his voice gentle. Dear Mr. Kittering, I want to thank you for considering me for your label. I know I need work on finding my style. I've been struggling with that, but I want you to know that I'm getting help. I've realized I made some bad choices with medication that someone told me would help my career. I'm stopping all that. I want to do this the right way, the clean way, the honest way. I want to make music that would make my brother Garrett proud. Not because I'm famous, but because I stayed true to who I am. Music should heal people, not destroy them. That's the kind of artist I want to be. Whatever happens with your label, I'm committed to being better, to honoring the gift I've been given. Sincerely, Andy Walsh. Garrett's legs gave out completely. He collapsed onto the equipment case, the words from Andy's letter echoing in his mind. His brother had been trying to get clean. Andy had been fighting to do things right. The dream hadn't killed him. One terrible mistake, one moment of weakness with a predator like Vincent Caruso had. He was getting better, Garrett said, his voice barely audible. He was trying to come back. Elvis knelt beside him again, setting the letter gently in Garrett's trembling hands. Your brother was a fighter, just like you. He loved you more than the dream. That's in every line he wrote. Garrett stared at Andy's handwriting, the familiar loops and slants he'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists their whole lives. His little brother's words full of hope and determination and love. I thought. Garrett's voice cracked. I thought the dream destroyed him. I thought wanting to be like you, wanting success, wanting to matter, I thought that's what killed him. No, Elvis said firmly. Vincent Caruso killed him. The pills killed him. The system that allows predators to operate killed him. But the dream? The dream was trying to save him. He was fighting his way back to it. The audience watched this intimate moment unfold, many crying openly now. This had stopped being a concert long ago. It had become something else entirely, a shared experience of grief and healing and truth. Elvis stood and addressed the crowd again. There's one more thing. We tracked down Vincent Caruso. Garrett's head snapped up. What? The Nashville police arrested him 3 days ago. He's connected to 4 other overdoses besides Marcus. Your brother's medical records were part of the evidence that finally gave them enough to charge him. Andy's story, his death, is going to help put that monster away and save other kids. The information hit Garrett like a wave. Vincent Caruso was finally facing justice. Andy's death hadn't been meaningless. Other young musicians might be saved because of what happened to his brother. Your brother's dream didn't kill him, Elvis repeated, louder now so the whole theater could hear. His dream was beautiful. It was the vultures circling the dream that were ugly. And we're going to do everything we can to get rid of those vultures. He turned to his band. I want to do something special now. With Garrett's permission. Garrett looked up, exhausted and emotionally wrung out. Your brother wrote original songs, didn't he? Elvis asked. 2. He had 2 on his demo tape. Do you know them? Could you teach me one? Garrett stared at Elvis Presley in disbelief. You want to sing Andy's song? I want us to sing it together, you and me. 20,000 people here tonight will hear Andy Walsh's music, his original music. The music he created from his heart. That's a better memorial than any gravestone. Fresh tears spilled down Garrett's face. I don't know if I can remember all the words. My memory's fuzzy and I'm drunk, and then we'll do our best. That's all Andy would want for us to try. Elvis smiled gently. What was one of the songs called? Mountain Man. About our daddy, about working hard and loving your family even when life is difficult. Elvis nodded. Sing me a verse. Teach it to me. Garrett's hands shook as he tried to remember. The whiskey made everything blurry, but slowly, haltingly, He began to hum the melody. Then words came back, simple lyrics about a man who worked in the darkness of mines so his children could live in the light. Elvis listened intently, his musical ear picking up the melody quickly. He hummed it back, then gestured to his piano player. "Can you follow this?" The pianist, a talented man who'd played with Elvis for years, listened as Garrett hummed again. He found the chords, began playing softly. The melody was simple but haunting, definitely country-influenced, with a touch of gospel. "It goes like this," Garrett said, his voice steadier now as the music awakened something in him. He sang a verse, rough and imperfect, but heartfelt. He was a mountain man, working underground, digging in the darkness so we could stand on solid ground. His hands were hard as stone. His heart was soft as rain. He gave us everything he had, never once complained. The words were simple, honest, exactly the kind of lyrics a young man from Tennessee would write about his father. The audience listened, captivated by the rawness of this moment. Elvis listened to the verse twice more, then nodded. "I've got it. Let's do this for Marcus, for your daddy, for everyone who works hard and loves deep, and never gets their name in lights." The band picked up the melody. The piano played gentle chords. The guitarist added soft accompaniment. They created a pocket of sound for Garrett and Elvis to fill. And then, together, they sang Andy Walsh's song. Elvis's professional voice blended with Garrett's broken, untrained one. When Garrett forgot words, Elvis hummed harmony. When Garrett's voice cracked, Elvis held the melody steady. They weren't performing, they were honoring, remembering, making sure Andy's music was finally heard. The second verse talked about the mountain man teaching his sons to be strong and kind. The third verse, which Garrett could only partially remember, was about the man's death and the legacy he left behind. Not money or fame, but love and character. By the end, half the band was crying. The backup singers swayed with emotion. Red West stood in the wings with tears running down his weathered face. When the last note faded, the theater exploded in applause again. But this time it was different. This was applause for Andy Walsh's songwriter, for a young man who'd written honest music about real life, for a dream that had been beautiful before it was corrupted. Elvis and Garrett stood together on stage, connected by music and loss and unexpected understanding. The king and the grieving brother, no longer adversaries but allies in grief. Elvis spoke to the audience one final time. Tonight was supposed to be a concert, just another show in a long line of shows. But Garrett Walsh stumbled onto this stage and reminded all of us why music matters. It's not about the spectacle or the money or the fame. It's about connection. It's about making people feel less alone. It's about honoring the people we love and the dreams we share. He put his arm around Garrett's shoulders. The Andy Walsh Foundation starts tonight with the proceeds from this show. But it's going to need more than money. It needs awareness. It needs people who'll speak up when they see young artists being exploited. It needs an industry that values human beings over profit. Elvis looked directly into the crowd. Every person here tonight is a witness. You saw what happened. You heard Andy's name. You listened to his song. Don't let this moment disappear when you leave this theater. Talk about it. Remember it. And if you see another Andy Walsh out there struggling, being preyed upon, losing their way, help them. Speak up. Don't look away. The audience rose again, applauding not just Elvis, but the message, the challenge, the call to do better. Elvis turned to Garrett one more time. You came here tonight to make me pay attention. Mission accomplished, but I want to give you something too. He gestured to Red West, who brought over a piece of paper and a pen. Elvis wrote something quickly, then handed it to Garrett. "That's my private number, not the number that goes through managers and assistants. My actual number. You call me anytime, day or night. You need help, you need to talk, you need someone who understands what it's like to lose people you love. You call me, we're brothers now, you and me. Brothers in grief and brothers in trying to do better." Garrett took the paper with shaking hands. He looked at Elvis Presley, really looked at him, and saw not a superstar, but a man. A tired, struggling, genuine man who just offered real friendship in front of 20,000 people. "Thank you," Garrett whispered. "I'm sorry I called you a fake. I'm sorry I blamed you. I was just so angry and hurt and—" "I know," Elvis said. "I understand. And you weren't entirely wrong. I have been fake sometimes, hiding behind the image, letting the pills keep me going, not facing the truth. But tonight, we were both real. That's what matters." He raised his microphone one last time. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to finish this show now. But I'm finishing it different than I started it. I'm not just performing for you. I'm sharing with you. Every song from here on out I'm singing for Andy Walsh and everyone like him who loved music enough to risk everything." The band started playing again. Elvis launched into another song, but his whole energy had shifted. He wasn't performing anymore. He was connecting, just like he'd said. Every note carried more weight, more meaning. Garrett sat on the equipment case and watched, tears still streaming down his face, but something loosening in his chest. The rage that had brought him here was gone, replaced by something unexpected. Hope. Not that Andy would come back, not that the pain would disappear, but hope that his brother's death might mean something, that other musicians might be saved, that dreams could be beautiful again if people fought to protect. When Elvis sang the final song of the night, the same tender love song Garrett had sung for Marcus, the entire audience sang along. 20,000 voices joining together, filling the massive theater with music that transcended performance and became communion. Garrett sang too, his broken voice lost in the chorus, but his heart fully present. He sang for Marcus, for their mother, for their father, for every dream that died too soon, and every dreamer who'd been exploited. And when the last note faded and the lights came up, Garrett Walsh knew he would never be the same. The grief would stay, would probably stay forever, but it no longer felt like it would destroy him, because Andy's name had been spoken. His song had been heard, and his dream, the real dream of making music that mattered, had finally come true. After the concert ended, Elvis's security team surrounded Garrett protectively, not to arrest him or remove him, to keep the excited crowd from overwhelming him. Hundreds of people wanted to talk to him, to hug him, to tell him their own stories of loss. Red West guided Garrett backstage through a maze of hallways. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving Garrett exhausted and suddenly aware of how drunk he still was. His head pounded. His mouth tasted like copper and whiskey. "Sit here," Red said, pointing to a leather couch in a quiet dressing room. "I'll get you some water and coffee. You're gonna need it." Garrett collapsed onto the couch. The room spun slightly. Everything that had just happened felt like a dream. Had he really sung on stage with Elvis Presley? Had 20,000 people really heard about Marcus? Elvis entered a few minutes later, his jumpsuit unzipped at the top, sweat still glistening on his face. He looked tired, but somehow lighter than he had on stage at the beginning of the show. "How you feeling?" Elvis asked, sitting in a chair across from Garrett. "Like I got hit by a truck," Garrett admitted. "A truck full of emotions and bad decisions." Elvis smiled slightly. "That's probably accurate. Red's bringing coffee. You're gonna stay here tonight. We've got extra rooms in my suite. Can't have you going back to some motel in the state you're in. I can't impose." You're not imposing, you're accepting help. There's a difference. Elvis leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Garrett, what happened tonight was important. Not just for you and me, but for a lot of people. The phone's already ringing. Reporters want interviews. People want to donate to the foundation. This is going to be big. Garrett felt panic rising. I don't want to be famous. I just wanted someone to know Andy existed. I understand, and will protect your privacy as much as possible. But some attention is unavoidable now. Elvis paused. There's something else, something I found out right before you came on stage, but I wanted to wait until we were private to tell you. Red returned with coffee, water, and a folder. He handed the drinks to Garrett and the folder to Elvis. This might be hard to hear, Elvis warned, but I think you need to know the whole truth about Andy's last days. Garrett's hands trembled as he set down the coffee cup. What truth? Elvis opened the folder carefully. After you mentioned Vincent Caruso earlier, I had Red do more digging. We talked to the Nashville police, to people who knew Marcus, to the medical examiner. He pulled out a document, an official-looking report. The pills that killed Andy weren't just regular amphetamines. They'd been cut with dangerous substances. Caruso was stretching his supply to make more money, mixing the pills with things that should never go in a human body. Garrett felt sick. I knew he was a dealer, but there's more. Elvis pulled out another paper. This is Andy's hospital record. According to the doctors, your brother had stopped taking the pills 3 days before he collapsed. What? Garrett's head snapped up. He was trying to quit cold turkey. That's actually what caused the collapse, withdrawal combined with the damage already done to his system. If he'd had proper medical supervision, proper support for getting clean, he might have survived. The information crashed over Garrett like a wave. Andy had been trying to quit, had been fighting to get clean. The letter Elvis had read on stage wasn't just words. Andy had actually taken action. Why didn't he call me? Garrett whispered. Why didn't he tell me he was in trouble? Elvis's expression was compassionate but honest. Pride, probably. Shame. Fear that you'd be disappointed. The same reasons any of us hide our struggles from the people who love us. Red spoke up from where he leaned against the wall. For what it's worth, the police said Andy had packed his belongings the day before he collapsed. Looks like he was planning to leave Nashville, maybe coming home. Garrett buried his face in his hands. Andy had been trying to come home, had been fighting his way back to health, back to family, back to the person he really was. And he'd died trying. I should have known, Garrett said through his tears. I should have heard it in his voice when he called. I should have gone to Nashville and dragged him home. You couldn't have known, Elvis said firmly. Andy hid it well because he didn't want to worry you. That's what people do when they love someone. They try to protect them from pain, even when it means suffering alone. He pulled out one more document. This is the letter Andy wrote but never sent to Summit Sound. We found it with his belongings. But there was something else in the envelope. Elvis handed Garrett a smaller piece of paper, a note written in Andy's handwriting on the back of a receipt. Garrett, I'm coming home. I made mistakes, but I'm fixing them. Going to be the brother you deserve. Tell Mama I love her. See you soon. The note was dated May 22nd, 4 days before Andy collapsed. Garrett stared at his brother's final written words. Andy had been coming home, had been getting clean, had been fighting to survive, and Garrett had never known. Had spent 6 months thinking his brother died chasing a false dream instead of fighting to reclaim a real one. He was a fighter, Elvis said quietly, right up to the end. That's what I want you to remember. Not the mistakes, not the tragedy, the fight. Andy Walsh didn't give up. He fought to get clean, to do things right, to come back to the people he loved. Garrett folded the note carefully, holding it like the precious thing it was. I've spent 6 months hating the dream, hating music, hating you, blaming everyone except the one person actually responsible. Vincent Caruso. Yeah. Garrett's voice hardened. He's really in custody. Red nodded. Arrested 3 days ago. The Nashville DA says they've got him solid. Multiple counts, distribution, manslaughter, racketeering. He's not getting out anytime soon. Your brother's medical records were crucial evidence, Elvis added. The doctors documented everything, the pills Caruso gave him, the lies he told, the exploitation. Andy's case, combined with 3 others, finally gave the police what they needed. Garrett felt something he hadn't felt in months, a sense that justice might actually exist. Caruso would pay. Other kids would be protected. Andy's death would prevent other deaths. There's something else you should know, Elvis said, pulling out a final document. This is from Summit Sound Recording. They want to release Andy's demo tape as a memorial album. All proceeds would go to the Andy Walsh Foundation. They're asking your permission as next of kin. Garrett looked at the contract in disbelief. Release his music? People would actually buy it? I've heard the demo tape, Elvis said. Red tracked it down at the studio. Garrett, your brother was talented. Really talented. His voice was special, and those original songs, they deserved to be heard. I don't know, Garrett said uncertainly. It feels like exploiting him. It's honoring him, Elvis corrected gently. It's letting the world hear what Andy Walsh could do. It's making sure his music, the thing he loved most, doesn't die with him. And the money helps other musicians avoid his fate. That's not exploitation, that's legacy. Red handed Garrett a small cassette player and a tape. Listen to it, decide for yourself. Garrett took the tape with shaking hands. The label, written in Andy's handwriting, said, Demo, Summit Sound. Take your time, Elvis said, standing up. You've been through a lot tonight. We've got rooms set up for you. Sleep, shower, eat something. Listen to the tape when you're ready. We'll talk more tomorrow. Why are you doing all this? Garrett asked. I came here to blame you, to make you feel guilty. Why are you helping me? Elvis was quiet for a moment. Because Andy's story is my story too, in a lot of ways. I've been where he was, taking pills to keep going, feeling trapped by expectations, losing myself in the machine. The only difference is I've been lucky enough, privileged enough, to survive so far. Andy wasn't, and that could easily have been me in that hospital bed. He looked at Garrett with complete honesty. Helping you helps me remember what matters. Helping create the foundation helps me do something meaningful with this fame that's been both blessing and curse. And maybe, just maybe, talking about this publicly will help other people, artists and regular folks alike, realize they're not alone in their struggles. Red led Garrett to a suite down the hall, a beautiful room with a huge bed, a bathroom with marble everything, and windows overlooking the glittering Vegas Strip. Get some rest, Red said. Tomorrow's going to be busy. Press will want statements. The foundation paperwork needs starting, and Elvis wants to introduce you to some people who can help. After Red left, Garrett stood at the window looking out at the city. Just 12 hours ago, he'd been a drunk, angry man planning to publicly humiliate Elvis Presley. Now he was standing in a luxury suite, holding his dead brother's demo tape, on the verge of starting a foundation that might save lives. He took the cassette player to the bed and sat down. His hands shook as he inserted the tape. For a moment he couldn't press play, couldn't face hearing Andy's voice again. But he had to know, had to hear what his brother had created. He pressed play. Andy's voice filled the room. Clear, strong, full of emotion and hope. The first song was a cover, Andy's arrangement of a popular country tune. Even through the simple recording equipment, his talent was undeniable. The way he phrased lyrics, the emotion he conveyed, the pure quality of his tone. Garrett closed his eyes and let his brother's voice wash over him. This was Andy alive, healthy, dreaming. This was before Caruso, before the pills, before everything went wrong. The second song was Andy's original, the Mountain Man song they'd sung on stage. Hearing the full version with Andy's guitar accompaniment and the passion in his voice, Garrett understood what Elvis meant. This was good, really good. People should hear this. The third song was another original. This one was about dreams and hope and small-town boys reaching for something bigger. The lyrics were simple but honest. I'm just a voice in the darkness, trying to find the light. Just a dreamer from nowhere, hoping I got it right. By the fourth song, Garrett was crying again. But these weren't tears of rage or despair, they were tears of pride. His little brother had made something beautiful, had created art that mattered. And even though Andy never got to see it appreciated in his lifetime, it could still reach people, could still heal, could still matter. When the tape ended, Garrett sat in silence for a long time. The Vegas lights blinked outside his window. The city that never sleeps pulsed with false promises and real pain. But somewhere in all that darkness, something good had happened tonight. Andy's name had been spoken. His music had been shared. And his death might actually save others. Garrett picked up the phone and dialed his mother's number. It was late, but she answered on the second ring. She never slept well anymore. Mama, it's me. Garrett? Baby, are you okay? I got your note about Vegas and I've been worried sick. I'm okay, Mama. Better than okay, I need to tell you something about Marcus. Something good. And as Garrett told his mother everything that had happened, the confrontation, Elvis's response, the foundation, the demo tape, he felt the weight he'd been carrying for 6 months begin to lift. Not disappear, the grief would never disappear, but lift enough that he could breathe. Enough that he could see a future beyond just surviving his brother's death. Andy Walsh had mattered. His dream had been beautiful. And even though he was gone, his music, his true legacy was just beginning. Morning sunlight streaming through the hotel curtains woke Garrett. For a confused moment, he didn't know where he was. The room was too nice, the bed too soft, the silence too complete. Then everything from the previous night crashed back. The stage, Elvis, Andy's song, the truth about his brother's final days. Garrett sat up slowly, his head pounding from the whiskey. He'd fallen asleep fully clothed, the cassette player still on the bed beside him. He picked it up and held it carefully, like it was made of glass. A knock at the door. Mr. Walsh? It's Red West. I've got breakfast and some aspirin. Can I come in? Garrett stumbled to the door and opened it. Red entered, carrying a tray loaded with food, eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice and coffee. The smell made Garrett's stomach turn, but Red just smiled. Eat something. Trust me, you'll feel better. Elvis wants to meet with you in an hour to discuss next steps. Garrett forced down some toast and drank 3 glasses of water. The aspirin helped. By the time he showered and put on the clean clothes, Red had somehow procured simple jeans and a button-down shirt that actually fit. He felt almost human. Elvis's suite was even more luxurious than Garrett's room. The living area was enormous, with multiple couches, a grand piano, and walls covered with gold records and photographs. Elvis sat at a table near the window, papers spread out in front of him, talking on the phone. When he saw Garrett, he wrapped up the call quickly. How you feeling this morning? Like I got run over by truth, Garrett said honestly. Elvis smiled. That's a good way to put it. Sit down, we've got a lot to discuss. Over the next hour, Elvis laid out a plan. The Andy Walsh Foundation would officially launch within 2 weeks. Elvis had already contacted lawyers to set up the paperwork. The $300,000 from last night's concert was just the beginning. Elvis was personally donating another $200,000 to get things started properly. The foundation will do 3 things, Elvis explained. First, provide counseling and support for musicians struggling with substance abuse. Real help, not judgment. Second, education programs to teach young artists about the dangers and how to recognize predators like Caruso. Third, financial assistance for musicians who need help. Rent money, medical care, whatever keeps them from getting desperate enough to accept pills from dealers. Garrett listened, overwhelmed. This is more than I ever imagined. It's what Andy deserved. What all the Andy Walshes out there deserve. Elvis pushed a document across the table. This is the contract from Summit Sound about releasing Andy's demo tape. I had my lawyers review it last night. It's legitimate. All proceeds go to the foundation, and you maintain control over how Andy's music is used. They can't exploit it. Garrett picked up the contract and read through it slowly. Everything Elvis said was true. This wasn't exploitation. It was honoring Andy's talent while helping others. There's one condition I want to add, Garrett said. Andy's full name and story has to be included with the album. Not just the music. People need to know who he was, that he was kind and loved his family and worked hard, that he was more than just another overdose statistic. Absolutely, Elvis agreed. In fact, I think we should include your mother's perspective too. Let Diane tell people about her son. Make Andy real to everyone who hears his music. They spent another hour going over details. A journalist Elvis trusted would write Andy's story for the album liner notes. Garrett and his mother would be interviewed but protected from media harassment. A portion of album sales would go directly to Diane to help with those crushing hospital bills. I can't accept charity, Garrett protested. This foundation should help musicians, not. Your mother is drowning in debt because her son tried to pursue music, Elvis interrupted firmly. That's exactly what the foundation is for, protecting families from the financial devastation that often comes with this industry. You're not taking charity, you're accepting what should have been there all along. A safety net. Red entered with more news. The phones haven't stopped ringing. 7 newspapers want interviews. 3 TV shows want you on. And we've already received over 50,000 in donations from people who were at the show last night or heard about what happened. Elvis looked at Garrett. You don't have to do any interviews you're not comfortable with, but I think telling Andy's story widely could help a lot of people. Families who've lost someone, musicians who are struggling, even just folks who need to know they're not alone in their pain. Garrett thought about it. The old hymn, the angry, drunk version from yesterday, would have refused, would have wanted to hide from attention. But something had shifted. Andy's story deserved to be heard. If telling it could save even one life, wasn't that worth the discomfort? I'll do interviews, Garrett said, but only with reporters who'll tell the truth. I won't let anyone sensationalize Andy's death or turn it into gossip. Fair enough, Elvis said. I'll personally vet every request. Over the next 2 days, Garrett stayed in Vegas working with Elvis on foundation details. They met with lawyers, accountants, and counselors who specialized in addiction. They drafted mission statements and program outlines. They set up a board of directors that included both music industry professionals and medical experts. Through it all, Garrett learned more about Elvis as a person, saw his genuine commitment to helping others, witnessed his own struggles with the pressures of fame, recognized a man who was, in many ways, as trapped as Andy had been, just with better luck and more resources. On the 3rd day, Garrett's mother arrived. Elvis had sent a car to Tennessee to bring Diane Walsh to Las Vegas in comfort. When she walked into the suite and saw her son, she burst into tears and held him tight. I thought I'd lost you too, she whispered. "When you went to Vegas drunk and angry, I thought, I'm okay, Mama, we're going to be okay." Elvis gave them privacy for their reunion, but later that evening he sat down with both of them to discuss the foundation and the album release. Diane held Andy's demo tape like it was sacred. "I haven't heard his voice since the funeral. I couldn't bear to listen to the recordings we had at home." "It might be hard," Elvis warned gently, "but it's also beautiful. Your son had real talent, Mrs. Walsh. The world should hear it." That night, the three of them listened to Andy's tape together. Diane cried through every song, but she also smiled, remembered, saw her youngest son as he'd been before Nashville, full of hope and joy and pure love for music. When the tape ended, Diane looked at Elvis with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for giving my boy's music a chance. Thank you for making his dream come true, even if he can't be here to see it. It's an honor, ma'am. Truly." Before Garrett and his mother returned to Tennessee, Elvis pulled Garrett aside one final time. "I meant what I said on stage. We're brothers now. You call me if you need anything, advice, help, just someone to talk to who understands. And I'm going to call you too, and I'm struggling. When the pills are calling my name, or the pressure feels like too much, we hold each other accountable. Deal?" Garrett shook Elvis's hand, then pulled him into a hug. "Deal." "And Elvis? Thank you. You could have had me arrested. Instead, you changed my life." "You changed mine too," Elvis said quietly. "You reminded me why any of this matters. You gave me a purpose beyond just performing. That's a gift." The flight home to Tennessee felt different than the bus ride to Vegas. Garrett sat beside his mother, holding her hand, feeling something he hadn't felt in 6 months: peace. Not happiness. The grief was still there, still painful, but peace. A sense that Andy's life and death had meaning. When they landed in Knoxville, reporters were waiting. News of what happened in Vegas had spread, but Garrett was ready. He stood in front of cameras and microphones and told his brother's story. Told it honestly: the dreams, the mistakes, the predators, the fight to get clean, the tragic end. "Andy Walsh was my little brother," Garrett said, his voice steady. "He was kind and talented and full of hope. The music industry failed him, but we're going to make sure it doesn't fail others. The Andy Walsh Foundation will help musicians get real support, real protection, real chances to pursue their dreams safely." Over the next several weeks, things moved quickly. The foundation officially launched with a press conference in Nashville, attended by Elvis, several other country music stars, and hundreds of supporters. The demo tape was released as Andy Walsh Songs from the Heart, and within a month, it had sold over 100,000 copies. People connected with Andy's music. The simple, honest lyrics, the pure voice, the story behind it all. Reviews called it heartbreaking and beautiful, and a reminder of talent lost too soon. More importantly, the foundation started helping people. A 19-year-old guitarist in Memphis got counseling before addiction took hold. A young singer in Atlanta got rent money so she didn't have to accept pills from a shady manager. 3 more predators like Vincent Caruso were arrested in different cities, their victims finally feeling safe enough to come forward. Garrett found purpose in the work. He became the foundation's director of outreach, traveling to music cities to talk with young artists, sharing Andy's story, providing resources. He stayed sober. The drive to drink faded as meaning filled the emptiness grief had created. His mother slowly healed too. The hospital bills were paid off through foundation assistance. She reduced her hours at the hospital and started volunteering with the foundation, talking to families who'd lost loved ones to addiction. Elvis kept his promise. He called Garrett regularly, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to discuss foundation business, sometimes when he was struggling and needed someone who understood. After his Vegas residency ended, Elvis did take time off. He worked with better doctors, reduced his pill intake, focused on his health. 6 months after that night in Vegas, Garrett stood at Andy's grave on what would have been his 29th birthday. Fresh flowers covered the plot, dozens of bouquets from people who'd heard Andy's music and wanted to honor him. Someone had left a note, "Your songs helped me through my divorce. Thank you, Marcus." Another said, "I was thinking about trying pills to help my music career. Your story saved me." Garrett knelt beside the grave and placed his own flowers, simple daisies, Andy's favorite. "Hey, little brother," he said softly. "Your album hit the charts this week. Number 3 on country, number 17 overall. Can you believe it? People all over the country are hearing your voice, your songs. The music you made in that little recording studio is touching lives." A breeze rustled the trees overhead. Somewhere nearby, a bird sang. The foundation helped 23 musicians this month. Counseling, financial support, education. 23 people who might have ended up like you, who now have a chance. That's because of you, Marcus. Because your story mattered. Garrett's voice grew thick with emotion. "I miss you every day, Mama does too. But we're okay now. We're doing something good with the pain. Making sure your dream, the real dream of music that heals and helps, lives on." He stood up slowly, touching the headstone one last time. "Rest easy, brother. Your song continues. Just like your headstone says. Your song continues." As Garrett walked back to his truck, he passed other visitors in the cemetery. A young woman with a guitar case stopped him. "Excuse me, are you Garrett Walsh?" He nodded. "I just wanted to say thank you. I was getting pressured to take pills by someone who said he could make me a star, but I read about your brother, about the foundation. I got help instead. I'm clean, I'm working on my music the right way, and I'm alive because Andy's story reached me." She smiled through tears. "Just wanted you to know. Your brother saved my life." Garrett hugged this stranger, this young woman his brother would never meet, but had somehow protected. He'd be glad. That's all he ever wanted, for his music to matter, to help people. Driving home, Garrett thought about how strangely life worked. 6 months ago, drunk and desperate, he'd stumbled onto a stage planning to destroy Elvis Presley. Instead, that moment had sparked something beautiful, had created meaning from tragedy, had turned his brother's death into a force for life. Andy Walsh had never become famous while alive, but in death his voice was reaching thousands. His story was saving lives. His dream, the real dream beneath the dream, was coming true. And Garrett finally understood what Elvis had tried to tell him that night. Dreams aren't the enemy. Predators are. Systems that exploit are. But the pure dream, the desire to create, to connect, to matter, that was sacred, that was worth fighting for. That was Andy's true legacy. September 1994, Nashville, Tennessee. Garrett Walsh stood at the podium in a sun-filled community center, looking out at 40 young faces. The teenagers sat in folding chairs, some holding guitars, others with notebooks. All of them dreamers, hoping to make it in music. "My brother Andy had a dream," Garrett began, his voice steady and strong. 20 years of sobriety, 20 years of purpose had given him confidence he'd never had as a younger man. His hair was gray now at 54, lines etched around his eyes, but those eyes were clear and focused. Andy wanted to make music that mattered, music that helped people feel less alone. That was his real dream, not fame, not money, but connection through song. He paused, letting his words settle. Behind him hung a large photograph of Andy at age 25, guitar in hand, smiling at the camera. Below it, a plaque read, "Andy Edward Walsh Music Hall." where dreams are protected. The building they sat in had been Garrett's project for the past 3 years, a place where young musicians could learn, practice, and get real mentorship without exploitation. It was one of 7 Andy Walsh Foundation centers now operating across the country. That dream led to his death, Garrett continued honestly, because Andy encountered people who cared more about profit than his well-being. He met a predator who gave him pills and false promises. He died at 28, never knowing how close he'd come to success. A girl in the front row raised her hand tentatively. She looked about 17, with nervous eyes and a worn guitar case at her feet. "Yes, Mr. Walsh, how do you keep believing in dreams after something like that happened? Doesn't it make you want to tell everyone to just give up?" Garrett smiled gently. "That's a smart question. And honestly, for a while, I did want everyone to give up. I blamed dreams, blamed music, blamed everyone except the person actually responsible." He walked to the edge of the small stage, closer to the students. "But here's what I learned. Dreams aren't dangerous. Exploitation is dangerous. Lack of support is dangerous. Predators are dangerous. The dream itself, the pure desire to create something beautiful, that's one of the most human things we have." An older woman in the back row wiped her eyes. Garrett's mother, Diane Walsh, now 69, still attended these sessions when her health allowed. She looked frailer than she used to, her hair completely white, but her face showed peace that had been absent for many years. The Andy Walsh Foundation has helped over 3,000 musicians in 20 years, Garrett said. Some of them are successful now. You've heard their songs on the radio. Most aren't famous, but they're making music on their own terms, safely, with support. That's what we're here for. He gestured to the walls around them. Photos lined every surface, young musicians the foundation had helped. All smiling, all thriving. Mixed among them were news clippings about predators who'd been arrested, laws that had been changed, programs that had been created. "We've worked with lawmakers to create better protections. We've shut down 15 operations like the one that killed Marcus. We've provided counseling to hundreds of families dealing with loss or addiction. And we've done it all because Andy's story mattered." A boy in the back raised his hand. "Did you ever forgive yourself for not saving him?" The room went quiet. It was the question everyone wondered but rarely asked. Garrett was quiet for a moment. "Some days, yes. Some days, no," he answered honestly. "Grief doesn't follow a straight line. Even 20 years later, I have moments where I think about what I could have done differently, the phone calls I could have made, the questions I should have asked." He looked at Andy's photograph. "But I've learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing. It's about accepting that we're all human and doing the best we can with what we know. I didn't save Marcus, but because of him, I've helped save others. That doesn't erase my regrets, but it gives them purpose." After the session ended, students lined up to talk with Garrett individually. The girl with the guitar case approached, her hands shaking slightly. "Mr. Walsh, I'm Luna. I've been offered a contract by a small label, but they want me to work with this manager who makes me uncomfortable. He keeps talking about pills that could help my energy. I don't know what to do." Garrett's expression became serious. "Tell me everything about this manager. His name, where he works, what exactly he said." As Luna talked, Garrett took notes. When she finished, he made 3 phone calls right there to a lawyer the foundation kept on retainer, to a reputable manager he trusted, and to a Nashville detective who specialized in industry exploitation. "You're not working with that manager," Garrett said firmly. "We're going to investigate him, and we're going to connect you with people who'll actually help your career, not destroy your life." Luna's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. I was so scared, but I didn't know who to tell. That's what we're here for. You're not alone." After the students left, Garrett helped his mother into his car for the drive back to her small house. She'd sold the yellow house years ago, too many memories, too much space for one person. Now she lived in a cozy cottage near Garrett and his wife Sarah. Yes, Garrett had married. 5 years after Andy's death, he'd met Sarah at a foundation fundraiser. She was a counselor who volunteered with addiction recovery programs. They'd bonded over shared purpose and slowly built a life together. No children, Garrett had never felt ready for that responsibility, but a good marriage filled with meaning. "Andy would be proud of you," Diane said as they drove through Nashville's streets. The city had changed so much in 20 years, grown bigger and shinier, but the music still poured from every corner. "I hope so, Mama." "I know so." She patted his hand. "You took the worst thing that ever happened to us and made something good from it. That takes strength." They passed a billboard advertising a new album from a young country singer, a woman the foundation had helped 3 years ago when she'd been homeless and struggling. Now she was nominated for awards, but she still volunteered with the foundation, teaching workshops and sharing her story. Garrett's phone rang. The number showed a Tennessee area code he didn't recognize. "This is Garrett Walsh." "Mr. Walsh, my name is Jennifer Chen. My brother died 2 months ago. Overdose. He was trying to make it as a musician in Memphis and someone gave him pills and I just heard about your foundation. I heard about Marcus. I need to talk to someone who understands." Garrett pulled over into a parking lot. This kind of call required his full attention. "I'm so sorry about your brother, Jennifer. What was his name?" David Chen. He was 26. He played piano and had the most beautiful voice." For the next 30 minutes, Garrett talked with Jennifer. Let her cry, let her rage, let her tell stories about David. Gave her information about grief counseling, connected her with the foundation's family support program. Made sure she knew she wasn't alone. When the call ended, Diane squeezed his hand. "You do this so well, making people feel heard." "I learned from the best," Garrett said, thinking of that night in Vegas when Elvis had stopped everything to truly listen to a drunk, angry stranger. Elvis. They'd stayed in touch all these years. Elvis had struggled. The pills, the weight, divorce, the constant pressure. But he'd kept fighting, kept trying to do better. They talked every few months. 2 men who'd been changed by one extraordinary night. Elvis's health wasn't great now. Garrett had visited him in Memphis just last month, and his friend looked tired in a way that worried him. But Elvis was still making music, still performing sometimes, still committed to the foundation that bore Andy's name. "He'll outlive us all," Elvis had joked during that visit, but Garrett heard the uncertainty underneath. That evening, after taking his mother home, Garrett drove to the cemetery. He still visited Andy's grave regularly, especially when he'd had a hard day or helped someone new. The cemetery was quiet in the fading light. Andy's headstone had weathered well, the inscription still clear. Andy Edward Walsh, 1946-1974, beloved son and brother. His song continues. Around the stone, someone had left fresh flowers. They appeared regularly now, from people Andy had never met, but whose lives his music had touched. Garrett sat on the bench nearby, the one he'd donated years ago. From his pocket, he pulled out a worn piece of paper, the note Andy had written, planning to come home. Garrett carried it always, a reminder that his brother had been fighting, had been trying. "Hey Marcus," he said quietly, "helped a girl today who reminds me of you. Talented, scared, being pressured by a predator. We're going to protect her. Another one saved because of you." A young man appeared on the path, maybe 19, wearing headphones and carrying a guitar. He noticed Garrett at Andy's grave and paused, then walked over slowly. "Excuse me, are you Garrett Walsh, Andy's brother?" Garrett nodded. The young man pulled off his headphones. "I just wanted to say thank you. I'm a musician, and I was going down a bad path. Someone showed me the documentary about your brother, the one from the 10th anniversary. It changed everything for me. I got help. I'm clean now, making music the right way." He gestured to the grave. "I come here sometimes to leave flowers, to remind myself what matters. Your brother's music got me through some dark times. That song about the mountain man, I play it before every performance now." Garrett stood and shook the young man's hand. "What's your name?" "Marcus. My parents named me after him. I was born in 1975, and they just heard his album. They said his story made them want to raise a son who understood that dreams required courage, but also wisdom." Garrett felt his throat tighten. That's beautiful. Marcus, my Marcus would be honored." They talked for a few minutes. Young Andy played a bit of the Mountain Man song on his guitar, his version respectful but with his own style woven in. When he left, Garrett sat back down, overwhelmed. 20 years. 20 years since that terrible night when Andy died. 20 years since Garrett's drunken confrontation with Elvis. 20 years of work, healing and purpose. And Andy's influence kept spreading, like ripples in a pond. Kids were named after him. Musicians honored him. Families found hope in his story. The foundation bearing his name had become a model copied by other industries. Garrett pulled out his phone and scrolled to a saved video, footage from that night in Vegas. Someone in the audience had recorded it, and years later it had surfaced online. Garrett watched himself stumbling onto the stage, pointing at Elvis, shouting accusations. Then he watched Elvis kneel, watched himself cry, watched them sing together, watched 20,000 people bear witness to grief, transformed into grace. He'd watched this video hundreds of times over 20 years, and it still moved him, still reminded him that even in our darkest moments, connection was possible. Healing was possible. Purpose could emerge from pain. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Dinner's ready. Come home when you're ready. Love you." Garrett texted back a heart emoji, then stood and touched Andy's headstone one last time. "Your song continues, little brother, in ways we never imagined, in ways that would make you proud. Rest easy." As he walked back to his car, the sun set behind him, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. In the distance, he could hear music playing from one of Nashville's clubs, someone's dream being lived, someone's song being sung. And Garrett smiled, because he knew that somewhere Andy was smiling too. The dream had been beautiful after all. It just needed people willing to protect it. We hope Andy's story touched your heart today. His dream was beautiful, and his legacy continues to save lives. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you listening from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. We love connecting with people from all around the world. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Every subscription helps us spread more stories of kindness, hope, and second chances to people who need them. And don't stop here. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another amazing true story that will inspire you. Remember, dreams are worth protecting, and every life matters. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Andy's message today. Thank you for being part of our community. We'll see you in the next story.